do roll call.
Hey, Vice President Diamond?
I'm here.
Director Hetherington?
Here.
Director Odette is absent today. Director Rolfe?
Here.
And Director Stevens?
Here.
All right. Awesome. Before we go any further into this, before we get into the special orders of business, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize James Harrell, who was the flight instructor who died in last week's crash. So we would want to extend our condolences to James' friends and family, and to the Mountain Lion Aviation family here at the airport for that loss. It's just always horrible when something like this happens, and when something like this happens so close to home, I think we all feel it a little bit even more intensely than ordinary. So just wanted to say that. Does anybody else have anything they want to say on that regard before we move on?
I think from the staff perspective also, same, David. I don't know if the passenger of the aircraft has been, his name has been released, but we understand he's in stable condition and will recover. And, that's the positive side of this. But yeah, we always reflect on these types of incidents after they each happen, but our thoughts go out to the family of James and his friends and family.
I heard from good authority today that the other pilot on board, although he did sustain some injuries, that he is expected to make a full recovery. So that's great news.
I would like to say that the emergency response to the crash was overwhelming and wonderful. I'd like to compliment everybody who responded.
I'll forward those on to them. Yeah. Along with our staff, I know we had a couple staff members there. Dave Hoffman as well as Hardy Bullock are on scene, and we go into a whole protocol when those incidents happen. I want to thank staff also for the way they responded to that.
Good job with that. Okay, let's go on to special orders of business. We've got 3 resolutions for 3 wonderful people, thanking them for their work on ACAT. Who would like to read one of these resolutions?
David, I'm remote and I cannot really do that.
Okay. Mary, you were saying?
Yeah, I'll read resolution number 2021-05 of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District commending Lee Golden. Whereas Lee Golden was elected as a director of the Airport Community Advisory Team September 26, 2012, and served through December 1, 2020. And whereas Lee Golden served as vice chair of ACAT during his tenure, November 14, 2017 through November 13, 2018, and chair of ACAT during his tenure, November 13, 2018 through February 4th, 2020. And whereas Lee Golden has served the people of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District well, faithfully, and conscientiously during this period of time. Now, herefore, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District as follows. 1, that Lee Golden is hereby commended by this Board of Directors for his faithful and conscientious service over 8 years, 2 months, and 4 days. Number 2, that the Board of Directors does hereby extend their best wishes to Lee Golden for his continued success in all future endeavors. Do I read the last part, Josh, or it's not really been?
No, that's okay, Director Hetherington. Thank you.
And I'll make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second.
Roll call vote?
And do you need public comment?
Oh yeah, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Okay.
All right, roll call. Vice President Diamond?
Yes.
Director Hetherington?
Yes.
Director Odette is absent. President Odette is absent. Director Rolfe?
Yes.
And Director Stevens?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then on tab number 2, resolution expressing appreciation to Ms. Stacy Caldwell. Anybody like to read Stacy's? If not, I'll read it.
I'll read it.
Okay, go for it.
Well, it's not loading. Hold on a second. Oh, here we go. Okay, resolution number 2021-06 of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District commending Stacy Caldwell. Whereas Stacy Caldwell was elected as a director of the Airport Community Advisory Team September 26, 2018, and served through December 1st, 2020. And whereas Stacy Caldwell has served the people of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District well, faithfully, and conscientiously during this period of time. Now, herefore, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District as follows. 1, that Stacy Caldwell is hereby commended by this Board of Directors for her faithful and conscientious service over 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. 2, that the Board of Directors does hereby extend their best wishes to Stacy Caldwell for her continued success in all future endeavors.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
I'll make a motion to adopt this resolution.
Second.
Do we have public comment on tab 2?
No public comment.
A roll call vote, please.
Director Diamond.
Yes.
Sorry, Vice President Diamond, I should say. Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Director Rolfe
Yes.
and Director Stevens.
Yes.
Awesome. So moving on to tab number 3, expressing appreciation to Ms. Lynn Larson. I would like to read this one if that's okay with everybody. Whereas resolution number 2021-07 of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District commending Lynn Larson. Whereas Lynn Larson was elected as a director of the Airport Community Advisory Team, ACAT, September 26, 2018, and served through December 1st, 2020. And whereas Lynn Larson has served the people of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District well, faithfully, and conscientiously during this period of time, now herefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Truckee Tahoe Airport District as follows. Number 1, that Lynn Larson is hereby commended by this Board of Directors for her faithful and conscientious service over 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. Number 2, the Board of Directors does hereby extend their best wishes to Lynn Larson for her continued success in all future endeavors. Thank you, Lynn. Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second. We have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, and public comment. It looks like to me like Lynn would like to speak to us. Can we unmute Lynn if Lynn's muted by us?
Okay, thank you thank you, David. It was an honor to serve, but I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the pioneers, the ANAC committee and the ACAT pioneers for the last, I think, over 11 years, who really did the hard work. And we should all be proud of how far this airport has come as a community partner and a relationship that's very positive. And I think that the ANAC and ACAT had a huge role in that. So they did the hard work and the rest of us came along and did the fine tuning. So I'm really proud of how far this airport has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And do we have any other public comment?
No public comment.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve this?
I moved. And Rick seconded.
And Rick seconded. All right. Can we get a roll call?
Yeah, Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Director Rolfe
Yes.
and Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks to Lee, Stacy, and Lynn for all that work and just for being awesome people. And I fully expect and hope that we will continue to work with them on lots of stuff moving forward. Good people there.
Yeah, and if I could real quick thank those members of ACAT and agree everything Lynn had said about our predecessors and everyone else that's helped with that process, and encourage all those folks to participate with us on our airport community team, the new program. So thank you for all your service.
Yeah, thanks to everybody there. And then we have on here, congratulations to Alan, is it Feek? Is that
Pike.
Fake.
Yes.
Okay. for achieving his airport certified employee ACE in airfield lighting.
I wanted to
more about that, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize Alan. More of our employees are taking advantage of these airport certified employee modules. They're quite involved. There's a lot of study, and then a 100 question exam that they take to essentially learn everything there is to know about airfield lighting. So it's great to have some of these certifications as they come on with different employees that have done them in finance and operations and other things. And just wanted to recognize Alan in his efforts there. It's an endeavor they take on voluntarily in their own time, and he completed that this last month.
Awesome, thank you, Alan. Was Alan involved with the LED lighting that was just put in on the taxiways?
No.
Okay. Just wonder if there was a connection there. All right, so I'll go on to the modification of the agenda. I have nothing to change on the agenda here. Does anybody else have anything to pull or add or change or anything here?
No.
No, we're good. All right, so now we're open to general public comment for anything that is not on the agenda this evening. Do we have any public comment?
Yes.
I have one too.
Okay, I don't know who said yes.
I said yes, Tom Meadows.
Oh, hi, Tom. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. For over 6 decades, the airport has given the people of this district a present that cannot be taken back when a board of directors molests it. That gift is open land with nothing on it. It is not only people that benefit from the open land. For instance, mountain bluebirds enjoy their natural habitat of open country. Every now and then, a board thinks that they should develop idle land with something other than aviation-related buildings. However, nothing should be built on airport land that is not aviation-related, especially this airport with its gift of open land. One might say that the airport needs the money that those 12, whoa, missed the paragraph. One might say that this 12 acres on the new RFP isn't enough land to be concerned about, but it is. And you should not pave paradise and put up a parking lot. One might say that the airport needs the money that those 12 acres will create, but that's malarkey. The airport doesn't need the money. What do you need money for? Holy cow, you're rolling in money as it is. This board should stop this RFP process today. There is absolutely no need for another non-aviation building on the district's open airport land, and you should spend the taxpayers' money on actual airport needs instead of molesting this open land. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Lauren, you had something, just another comment?
Yeah. Okay. This one is from Nikki Riley, a Truckee resident. Over the last year, the plane noise and disturbances from low-flying planes in my neighborhood have grown immensely. I live in Glenshire near the Juniper Hill entrance off of Somerset Drive. Every day there are planes flying overhead, some prop planes, but many jets. When I reviewed the flight paths for incoming and outgoing planes, I didn't see the area over Glenshire designated as a flight path. I understand the arrival of many more people to our region has occurred, and it's definitely taking its toll on those of us who have benefited from the quiet neighborhoods we have lived in for a long time. I am also aware about the limitations the district has on telling pilots where and when they can fly to and from the airport. However, I do remember the great success we had 15 years ago or so ago when there was a concerted effort on behalf of the district and the community to help pilots be respectful of our small mountain town and to not fly over the homes where people live year-round. I think it is time once again to make a strong and vocal effort towards educating the new pilots and arrivals to this area that when their loud, low-flying jets travel over our homes, it is an unwelcomed nuisance. I appreciate your service to this region, and I'm hopeful we can begin to address this issue. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And that was all you got there, Lauren?
Yes.
All right, the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull on the consent agenda?
I would like to pull the minutes just because I want to vote abstain on it. But
Okay.
since I went,
Director Heatherington, if you wish, you can just abstain on one item in the consent and vote on the balance. It can be pulled if you'd like, but you also could do it that way if you wish.
yeah, I'll go the other way then. Thank you, Josh.
All right. So then should we get a roll call? Actually, do we have any public comment on anything on consent?
I have no public comment.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
I move we approve the consent agenda. Do we need a move on that? No motion required, it says. Never mind.
Yeah, I think we just need the roll call vote. Is that correct?
So I apologize if I missed it, but we do need a motion to move the consent. The no motion required is for any informational items. We have the 4 action items.
Yeah, there's the action item. And, yeah.
I move we approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
We have a second?
I will second them with, except for the minutes, which I need to abstain. Is that right, Josh?
That's right. Yeah, you can second the motion and then abstain from the minutes. Thank you, Director Heatherington.
All right. And then roll call vote?
Vice President Diamond,
Yes.
Director Heatherington,
Yes.
President Odette is absent, Director Rolfe,
Yes.
and Director Stevens.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Going on to item number 5, the JPA presentation.
Yeah.
Are we, Kevin, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll just introduce Emily Vitus, our Executive Director from the Housing Joint Powers Authority that we're a member of. And annually, you'll get a report from the JPA and kind of talk about what they're doing, what activities are going on. We'll also talk a little bit about our membership dues because JPA is on a fiscal year, whereas we're on a calendar year. So as we start our budget process, it's nice to know what those numbers are. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Emily and she'll take you through a brief presentation, then there'll be time for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, members of the board and airport staff. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quick. I've got a presentation for you this evening. I'll keep it under 10 minutes. Okay, can we all see this okay?
Yes.
All right. Let's get this started. Let's see, give me just a second here. I've got 2 screens running. Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening, and thank you again for your participation in the Workforce Housing Agency and your willingness to approach our housing situation with an innovative solution. So it's been 7 months since we last met, since I presented to the board, and in that time we have seen some pretty major shifts in housing accessibility and affordability. Fortunately, the airport and your member agency partners have already taken action to address housing concerns by founding the Workforce Housing Agency, which has resulted in a year of good progress and some big accomplishments. So this evening, I want to share those accomplishments, share with you what we're working on currently, what the future of housing activities through the Workforce Housing Agency looks like. And before we move into housing agency activities, I would like to share an update on the state of housing in Tahoe, Truckee right now, which I know all of us know looks a little bit scary. So I'm going to give us all a few seconds to kind of let this information sink in. You know, we're all hearing the stories and reading the articles, but seeing the comparison from when I first started tracking these numbers is fairly astounding. You know, every few days we're seeing Truckee, Tahoe people post about another local family who's losing their home. Locals are losing their rentals at an alarming rate. The hospital shared with me recently that a few of their employees have been offering over asking price on homes in Reno, and they still cannot find a home to buy. A recent housing needs survey led by the Mountain Housing Council showed that 25% of respondents have been displaced from their rentals over the last 2 years due to the owner selling or wanting to use their home in a different way. So housing efforts to keep our employees in long-term stable housing close to where they work, if that's what they prefer, have been more important than ever. Let's see, next slide. So when I met with you 7 months ago, we provided the results of the Employee Housing Needs Assessment, the survey that Wendy Sullivan conducted for us. And we shared a couple of pretty concerning statistics, and I wanted to share some of these statistics again with you so we all know why we're here, why this work is so very important. So as you'll see here, I have the airport district on the left and the housing agency percentages on the right. And overall, your employees are in more of a stable living situations than many of our member agency employees as a whole. However, they are still struggling. I've spoken with 4 or 5 of your employees over the last year regarding their housing concerns and needs, and that's 15% of your current employee base. And as shown here on the table, 16% of your employees said they were considering leaving employment in part due to housing, and 32% currently rent. So those two numbers, to me, equal potential turnover and potential loss of housing that could result in turnover. Fortunately, this survey and the report from Wendy Sullivan also provided us with a lot of potential solutions and possible paths that we could take on this housing journey. So your employees told us what was important to them, and then my board took these programs that you're looking at here and combined them with the many options that were presented by both your employees and our consultant. And we worked together to create a 5-year housing work plan that could help guide us through this work. So in December, we completed the 2021 through 25 housing work plan. We started with 3 areas of focus that the board chose to really try and impact in the coming years. So in developing and talking through these focus areas, we really asked, how do we secure housing that we can control and provide to our employees, no matter what the market looks like and what the levels of displacement are? How can we expand the programs we're already administering and build others to respond to employee needs? And finally, are there any non-housing related opportunities that could help ease the burden of housing costs for your employees? So these are the areas that we really wanted to focus on and impact over the coming years. We included some fairly conservative targets for the work plan, knowing that we're still new, we're still building our foundation. If we can get to a place where we are actively supporting over 10% of our employees every year, while also working with our regional partners to move housing programs forward, that will be a big win. I've listed here the 6 activities that we have chosen to work on that fall under those 3 focus areas that I shared, and I'll just talk briefly through these 6. On workforce housing development, we are currently completing a land mapping exercise to explore development opportunities on member agency-owned land. I will share with you that we did choose to remove airport district land from that opportunity matrix, knowing that many of your parcels were purchased, the intention of keeping them free of housing. So we are looking at a few other member agencies' parcels right now, and we're hoping to complete that exercise in the next few months. Additionally, we are meeting with other public agencies and developers to explore partnerships on other parcels and hope to have some good news on that front in the coming months. With master leasing, we are currently building out our program, hoping to go live with that in September. And we're working with a few different developers who have units coming online in the next year or two to secure blocks of units for our employees. So we will act as the leaseholder and enter into agreements with your employees to lease units for the long term. And this approach provides security and stability for both employees and unit owners. As rent will always be paid, units will always be cared for, and we can hopefully secure units for more than a year at a time so our employees also have housing stability. The Employee Concierge Program is really just our fancy way of saying we are acting as an outlet for all things housing for your employees. I hear from employees on a variety of housing related questions and issues. questions about mortgages, questions on what, this is my household income, what can I afford in the region? And then once they understand that, can you help me connect to the affordable housing units, for example. So there is now a place that employees can go when they're searching for somewhere to live, or they're looking to understand the housing landscape and opportunities available to them, which has been, seems to be very popular with your employees. The Housing Match program, currently with Landing Locals, connects your employees with second homeowners looking to lease their homes long-term. So we were wrapping this program up after a 12-month pilot program, and my board actually approved a $75,000 budget to put towards an incentive program to increase the number of units we can unlock for employees through a similar model. On the housing education front, nearly 40% of our employees asked for housing education through the employee survey that we conducted in July of 2020. How can I access down payment assistance? How do I calculate the mortgage I can actually afford? In addition, we have a number of existing homeowners whose home situations have them looking to leave, though with the housing market, the shift in the market and the increase in housing costs over the last many years, it's difficult. So can we help our existing homeowners access loan products and rebate programs to improve their living situations? And finally, we have a unique opportunity as a JPA to work together on a variety of solutions for issues each of our agencies face that directly impact employees' abilities to afford housing. So can our member agencies come together to explore some of those as well? So looking back on the last year, we all know it's been a challenging one, but it has been a year of good progress for the housing agency. We're building something that no one else has. That takes time, resources, creativity, commitment, and it has been fun. Our first months were committed to founding, and while completing those founding activities, we are also working to execute the housing needs assessment. And in July, we also began those first two housing-related initiatives, which is the concierge program and the housing match program. The housing work plan was then developed and finalized in December. And finally, we've made some really great progress with relationships and building and cultivating relationships with local partners, developers, et cetera. We are meeting with developers and talking to developers to understand what is coming down the pipeline, if there's master leasing opportunities, and also those relationships are going to be important if we move forward with development on any publicly owned land. So this table represents all interactions and housing successes we've achieved in the last year when we first started housing activities. So we're looking kind of at July 2020 for that beginning of all the housing related stuff. And I'll just talk about each of these very briefly. So the first row you see here is the employee concierge section, and that represents those employees that I've connected to and the housing agency has been a resource for. So we don't know how many employees the program has actually placed in housing. We are planning to do a survey to gather more specific data. We've connected actually 14 employees through the housing match program now. We had another match last week, and that's connecting employees and their families with long-term homes through that housing match program with Landing Locals. This next line is a really exciting one that I think you all probably know about already. But a few months back, in a partnership with the town, we learned of a deed-restricted home coming available that we advertised to your employees. And as a result of Lauren working very quickly and sharing that opportunity with your employees, the top two applicants were airport employees, and the gentleman who purchased the home is one of yours. So this feels like one of the biggest wins we've had in the last year. Anytime that we can place employees in or help them purchase a home, it ensures longevity, and that's pretty exciting. Again, on the housing purchase front, Hopkins Village has a qualified buyers list of about 25, maybe getting close to 30 now. 6 or 7 of those employees are ours. We've worked hard to share this project with employees, and as a result, we're hoping they have the opportunity to buy a home in a region that they never thought that they could afford to live in. I spoke with the developer on Hopkins just earlier this week, and he actually let me know that they will have all 40 units done in 2022. We thought that this was going to be a 4-year project. It's actually going to be a 1.5 year project as far as, breaking ground and having homes ready to sell. So that's really exciting for our employees. And finally, we've helped over 80 employees secure housing or access resources around housing, which is exciting. Our target was to help 17 employees get into homes in the 2021 calendar year, and we're hoping to do that and get to that number in the next month or so, which is great. Okay, so that brings us to now. What are we currently working on? So I touched upon the Mountain Master Leasing Program. I've touched upon almost all of these actually, except for the last one. So the board did vote recently to welcome the counties and the town of Truckee on as new members. They'll be joining on September 1st, 2021. We're hopeful and confident that bringing them in will provide additional resources and partnerships to access additional housing opportunities for our employees. Oh, one more. And then finally, member contributions. So we calculate our member contributions based on number of employees. And the board did talk about when we're down the road a little bit and have some more housing successes under our belt, potentially looking at a calculation that also looks at the number of employees that we have served over the previous year. So while Truckee Tahoe Airport District's contribution is fairly low, we are looking solely at your 28 employees right now for that number. And we are hopeful that there'll be other opportunities for you to participate in housing programs for your employees and other opportunities throughout the year. And with that, I'm going to close it down and thank you very, very much for your support of this program and this agency. And looking forward to any comments or questions you have on anything I presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Let's just go around in the order I'm seeing everybody on the screen. Rick, do you have any comments or questions for Emily?
I do not. Thank you.
Mary, how about you?
No, great job. Keep it going.
And Kat? You're muted, Kat. You were muted, Kat. We didn't hear.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, I don't have any questions. Just to comment, this is such a huge job, and Emily, I think you're just doing an amazing job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I do have one thing to add in terms of this is great for the public, but there are some private employers in town that are big, in our region, not just in Truckee, or if we think of our region. And I would hope this would be a catalyst or a wake-up call to them as well, the big employers and the small employers, because they're all advertising for people. I'm reading about J1 people coming in and not being able to find a place. And I somehow to challenge the private people who, I just hate to lose our fabric. If we lose, it's not just public employees who need help. We can only do that through our charters, but it's a much bigger issue.
And on that front, I would like to share, Director Hetherington and members of the board, the Mountain Housing Council is coming together on Friday for an emergency housing meeting of all of our members to talk about what's happening right now in the region and see if there are emergency ordinances, temporary housing solutions that we can work on together, knowing that our private business community, our business community needs to be a part of that conversation. And I am speaking with a number of our businesses through the chamber and this role, sharing ideas, seeing kind of what the landscape looks like. And I know that it is a major issue. So I'm hopeful that conversation on Friday will come up with some potential, quick or temporary solutions. And if any members of the board would like to participate in that, I'm happy to share the information. I'm sure that your staff has that information as well.
Thank you.
All right. And I have nothing more to add other than just great job on that, Emily. And thanks for the presentation.
Thank you all very much.
Do we have any questions or comments from staff?
Just I wanted to convey that over. There's a lot of exciting things happening. We have another meeting on Friday of something I'll be bringing forward to the board at a future meeting that we're still trying to develop that involves the Forest Service and some other things with some land. And so there's a lot of really neat things cooking. And as we've got this JPA kind of running, people are now starting to contact us with opportunities. And I just think it's going to take off and grow along with other agencies that, want to join as we continue to move along. So thank you, Emily, for your great work, and thanks for your presentation.
One other thought was, I've been pushing that 40-acre parcel for industrial, but maybe that 40-acre parcel should be looked at for housing. Just the thought. I mean, TTSA and has a need for employees as well.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Oh yeah. We've had conversations about that with them in the past.
Well,
Yeah.
you could put a lot of housing down there.
It's been a little while, so maybe it's time to raise it again.
And before we move on, Lauren, do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
All right. Again, thank you, Emily. Let's move on to item 6. Review and possibly approve the updated aviation forecast. Kevin, you want to take the lead on that as well?
Yeah, so we've been talking about this about a little over a year ago. Board approved some funding for us to do a 5-year update on our aviation forecast. And so we've been working with Mead and Hunt to get this update complete. It is essentially chapter 2 of the master plan, looking at changing conditions and different things that have occurred. And so what we're going to do today is we've got various folks from Mead and Hunt. They'll introduce themselves here in a second, that we've been working with from a staff perspective to redo and update this aviation forecast. Once the board accepts or approves, and it can be at this meeting, it can be at a future meeting, we then submit it to the FAA for their approval. So it's a big document, or it's not really a big document, but there's a lot of data in it. So you are under no time pressure to approve it at this meeting. We wanted to introduce it to you, find out what other information you need. If you feel like it's good to go, we can push it forward. And there's a slide at the end where we'll summarize this again. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Buzinski with Mead and Hunt.
Okay, how's that? I assume you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, and we can see your presentation.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kevin, staff, and the board for giving us this opportunity to present. And we'll try to be as succinct as possible, knowing that this will probably lead into some discussion and questions. This is just an overview of what I'm going to go through tonight. The ALP project, just giving an update on what that is specifically. But the main focus here is going to be the aviation activity forecasts. We're going to review your historical operations, go over the draft document and the preferred forecast for based aircraft and operations, discuss your critical aircraft, and then go into next steps. Since we're not in person, I at least wanted to put some faces to names here, and who's on the call from Mead and Hunt. You have myself. I think I've met most of the board. I was a planner on the master plan, and since that time I've led planning projects at the airport. I'm going to tackle the first half of this presentation and go over some of the ALP components and some of the historical forecast numbers. Patricia Song is a aviation planner out of our Ontario, California office. She is, I consider, an expert for forecasting and has brought some new methods and approaches to forecasting at general aviation airports. Then Mitch Hooper is our department lead for the Southwest Planning Group. He collaborates with Patricia on forecasts as well. All three of us will be here for questions. So why did we do an ALP update? I think it's important to note that this isn't meant to replace the master plan from a plan perspective. The airport has gone through a lot of changes in the last 5 years since the master plan was approved. And that was really your last approved ALP. Since then, we've gone through what they call pen and ink changes, where every year Kevin and I will go through and basically anything that's been updated as far as construction updates, like to the taxiways. I know that there was some right angle changes from the master plan that have been done. Hangar 2 fell down a few years ago from snow. The executive hangars have been constructed on the west side. So items like that get updated, and it's meant to be what they call a pen and ink update, where the FAA will approve it through a letter, but they won't officially stamp the whole set. We're also looking at evaluating some non-aviation land use. This kind of coincides with the TTSA potential swap. It isn't meant to be something that will be forced. It's just meant to go hand in hand. If that were to occur, you're going to want that on your ALP when we submit this, and you want it on an approved ALP. And integrate recent AGIS survey, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But essentially the goal is to get a full ALP set stamped and approved by the FAA. Again, this is your ALP of record from the master plan, and I'll just point, these hangars have been built down here. The 45-degree angle taxiways have been updated. Hangar 2, the control tower is there now. So items like that we're looking to clean up for your approved ALP. And that's drafting that, and that's aside from what the forecasts do. I want to stress again that we were not looking to make any changes to runway 220 from the master plan. That would essentially be retained for future analysis. I just want to discuss briefly airports GIS. 2 or 3 years ago, I worked with Hardy to get the airport, for lack of a better term, into the system. This is a relatively new system that the FAA has put together. It's essentially a catch-all portal for construction projects and digital mapping of the airport that the FAA can monitor and approve projects. And to get into that, we flew the airport and did a verified survey. And there's more detail. I can get into that if anybody has questions about it. What the benefits of that are is, 1, you're in the system. The airport is in the system, which is great. 2, we have been looking at your obstructions, not only at the 1-1 end, but at the 2-2 end and some other places on the airport. So from that, we're going through mitigation process. And when this ALP is submitted, it'll be a full airspace plan update, and the obstructions will be up to date. So why update the forecasts? Mead and Hunt is very sensitive to the board's mission statements and what, that you are a community airport and that you are very concerned about what your operations do to the community and how they affect your neighbors. But from the FAA's perspective, they like periodical updates of the forecasts. Every 5 to 10 years, and that doesn't have to necessarily coincide with a master plan. The FAA on the West Coast has generally gone away from supporting major master plan updates if they're not needed, and have done more of these ALP narrative reports, which can be very fluid in how they're laid out. But so for one, the FAA likes the periodical update, and 2, when they are updated, it helps justify funding for capital programs, and it supports your long-term facility planning. Another reason is the master plan forecasts have been reached, and I was a big part of that. Mary, I know you were a big part of that, but as much as I thought the methodologies we used in the master plan were good, we have new forecasting methods, and Patricia will get into that, specifically for general aviation resort mountain airports. The other thing is the FAA is really scrutinizing design critical aircraft, and we'll discuss that at the end of the presentation. To justify a lot of your capital improvements, you need to prove that you have an aircraft that is being used there so many times, and the forecasts help justify not only what is there today, but what is there in the future. I want to just hit on 2 things right now before we get into the numbers. We used base year 2019 for these forecasts. The reason for that is when we started forecasting, it was September of last year, I believe. And we didn't have a full calendar year of 2020 of Truckee data. And 2 was just the 2020, we're going to consider an outlier, and even how the FAA is reacting to operations in 2020 it's still kind of unknown, and that's a fluid process as well. So 2019 is the base year. You'll see that for your operations, that 2019's base. We discussed COVID at length and the effects that it had on Truckee and the general aviation industry as a whole in the paper. But I'm not going to get into that right now, besides telling you that, if anything, general aviation airports and airports like Truckee did better because those who have the ability to fly non-commercially did. And your numbers in 2020 were not significant, or were lower, but they weren't as impacted as they were at, say, Reno or other commercial airports. This is just a slide just looking at your operations over the past 11 years. I think the one thing I want you to look at here is just the bottom line. Obviously, you've grown from 20,000 operations to it's doubled essentially, and there's reasons for that. I was talking to Kevin and some of the other staff, and there's a belief that in 2009 you're coming right out of the Great Recession and the housing crisis. So since then, operations have grown. What we believe to is where they were pre-Great Recession in the 2016, 2017 levels of about 35,000. I will say that the technology that the airport staff puts out there is fantastic and allows us to produce accurate numbers with the vector and now the tower. I want to explain a few terms that you're going to hear through this, and these are FAA requirements. For one, the FAA requires the fiscal year reported, so you may see some discrepancies in the numbers at the bottom, slightly, 30, 40 operations here and there. The touch and go numbers or training flights, during the master plan, those numbers were not recorded, and that is something that we need to show under the local category. And we estimated those at 20% of all single engine piston. And that's how they're reported on this historical table. Since we started these forecasts, I've had discussions with tower staff and the airport staff that going forward, we believe that number should be closer to 35% of all piston single. So anything in this top row here. Air taxi is your charter flights. Again, that's an estimate, but it is an FAA requirement that we have to show. And that data isn't as easy to come by. Speaking to the tower and your staff, we estimated that at 12% of all operations. And that's not broken out on this slide. And then the local itinerant split. That local is primarily training flights, and the itinerant are coming from airports. And we found that split in 2019 to be 42% local and 58% itinerant, which is rather typical for a resort airport, airports that are similar to Truckee. This is just a highlight on some trends that we're noticing, and I want to note that this is not an anomaly to Truckee, that this is across the board at airports similar, resort and general aviation airports. The drop in not only pure operations, but the proportion of piston twin over the past 10 years, and then just the opposite for turboprops and those medium-sized jets. That's a nationwide trend, and that proportion, so to speak, is expected to continue. This is just a brief overview of the master plan forecasts, and I just want to point your attention to the lower right corner. We had your total operations at 31,025. Obviously, we've exceeded those. And the other thing that I found interesting here was that our local itinerant split was actually opposite from where it is today. And I'm not sure how that came to be, but it's essentially 40-60, and I think we're showing it opposite here. I want to get into the base. We also looked at your based aircraft. The trend here was, in talking to staff, is that in post-Great Recession, you had hangar vacancies. And as the economy recovered and you saw the operations recover after that, your hangars became filled in 2016. And the only change here was in 2019, and that was after the construction of the executive hangars on the West Airfield. So our based aircraft forecast is essentially a constrained forecast, really just filling the hangars that are shown on your master plan, which are, I believe are additional 12 hangars. And then the based aircraft, there's essentially two lists that we need to look at. One is your inventory, what the airport keeps, and what the FAA considers validated. This is a new requirement that the FAA is really cracking down on. It used to be that airports would say they had 238 aircraft, and the airport next door had 238 aircraft, and Scottsdale had 238 aircraft, when in reality, they were counting the same aircraft 3 times. The FAA is now really cracking down hard on one aircraft, one airport home base. And that is their official count for the airport. However, they do recognize that there is, and we came up with the term seasonal during the master plan. And that's your true count. That's the amount of hangars you need. Obviously, you have tenants that are there part-time, half the year, that may not officially register their aircraft at the airport. So with that, those are, the project in a nutshell and your historical data. I'm going to pass this off to Patricia now. I will say that there is a lot of factors that are somewhat out of the control of the airport. And that was really, I point back to the 2015 demand driver study. We reference it again in the forecasts. There's just so much appeal in the area. We saw it in the presentation before this. I try to keep up on your news. I know that you've seen an influx of residents up there since this time last year. So we're very conscious of those factors that go into this. But with that, I'll hand it off to Patricia, and we'll circle back and be happy to answer any questions at the end.
So I'm going to go over the methodology that we used for the forecast. So first thing is I want to go over kind of the more complex methodology we use, which is correlation and regression analysis. In order to account for the demand factors in the operations forecast, correlation and regression analysis were performed on various socioeconomic variables. So to kind of explain correlation, give an overview, is that it's the measure of the strength of the relationship between two variables and the rate of change of two variables. So the stronger the correlation, the more linear the relationship between these variables are. So a positive correlation means two variables would increase together, while a negative correlation means as one variable declines, the other one increases. So what we consider a strong correlation would be a correlation coefficient that approaches the value of either 1 or -1, while having no correlation equals a coefficient of 0. So for the purpose of analysis, the coefficient greater than 0.8 is considered strongly correlated. So our analysis of the regional socioeconomics show that that regional socioeconomics strongly correlate with airport operations. So the 5 variables shown on these tables are the 5 variables with the highest correlation with operations. And the variables are the Truckee Grass Valley microstatistical areas, populations, employment, total retail sales, income per capita, and gross regional product. And you'll see on the slide that we mentioned Nevada County, Placer County, and Sacramento metropolitan statistical area, because we also analyze a larger area as well for comparison. So thus the forecast methods that we tried focused on these variables and seeing what combinations fit for multivariable analysis.
What does GRP stand for?
Gross regional product.
Okay, that's right. I read that. Thank you.
So I'll go more into detail about the additional forecasting methods that we use, but I'll go into detail for all of these that you see on the slide, but here's the overview. So we tested 5 different methods, and the first one on the list is the FAA terminal area forecast rate, method, which is based on the 2019 TAF's growth rate. So essentially it takes the growth rate that the FAA assigns to the airport while developing the TAF and applies it to the base year operations. The next methods are the total operations regression and turbine regression methods that use the correlation analysis that I discussed on the last slide. Both are based on multivariable regression models using socioeconomic variables to calculate projected operations. And the fourth method is the pure airport forecast method that uses airports with similar demand and characteristics as Truckee. So the forecast is done with a compound annual growth rate of turbine aircraft at peer airports, which is sourced from the FAA's TFMSC data. Essentially, it assumes that operations could change at similar rates as these peer airports. And lastly, we have the historical trend forecast method, which uses the compound annual growth rate of from 2015 to 2019 at Truckee, and it carries it through the forecast period. And so here is a summary of all the methodologies we looked at. You can see here that the dotted line from 2015 to 2019 are the historical operations, which is based on airport provided data. And the dip in 2020 is what we estimated at the time of doing the forecast, which the impacts on operations from COVID-19 restrictions, which is, and it's estimated as at the time that we did this analysis, it wasn't known what the full impact was. And so the 2019 TAF method, or the terminal area forecast method, is that flat blue line you see at the bottom. As you can see, the FAA had the growth rate set at 0% for the next 20 years. This isn't too unusual, as the FAA doesn't actively forecast operations at individual airports, but applies a kind of general growth rate based on the location and general characteristics of an airport. And the total operations regression is that green line that you see there has over 77,000 operations by 2040. The multivariable model that was used here uses the population and GRP, which results in a 2021 to 2040 compound annual growth rate of 3.5%. And I'll mention that we use 2021 to 2040 to indicate growth rate, average annual growth rates, because like Brad mentioned, that 2020 is an anomaly, so we're kind of not counting it, and we're starting from 2021 to mark forecasted growth rates. And the thicker blue line right underneath the total operations regression is the turbine operations regression, which is, well, I'll spoil it, is the preferred forecasting method. It has a compound annual growth rate of 1.9% from 2021 to 2040. So this method also uses the GRP, but it uses income per capita in a two variable model. Due to the historical relationship between having high GRP and high income is correlated to high likelihood of using private and chartered jets for business and leisure travel. And the peer airport method is that yellow line underneath the turbine method. This incorporates 6 airports. We included Aspen, Eagle Vale, Jackson Hole, Sun Valley, Telluride, and South Lake Tahoe, and then we averaged the turbine operation growth rates from 2009 to 2019, and then applied it to the airport's own turbine aircraft operations as a growth rate. The reason why this method focuses on turbine aircraft is just because the TFMSC database has more comprehensive data for such aircraft, since it uses filed flight plans and flights detected by the National Airspace System, which means that information is missed if pilots don't file flight plans and flight paths or cancel them before landing. And finally, this very steep red line that you see that ends up with over 150,000 operations is the historical trend method. As you can see, it outpaces all the other methods significantly, as the growth the airport has experienced between 2015 and 2019 is super high and has an average annual growth rate of 7.5%. We didn't go yet. Sorry, next slide. Yeah. So as mentioned before, the preferred forecast method is the turbine regression method, and this is because this method incorporates strong correlation between local socioeconomic indicators, and accounts for nationwide trends that show multi-engine piston aircraft operations declining, like Brad had mentioned, along with incorporating the effects of market maturation and the limited capacity for additional base aircraft. Essentially, it accounts for specific characteristics such as the turbine aircraft fleet mix changing and factors impacting single-engine piston aircrafts at the airport. So this table shows a breakdown based on the categories that the FAA requires in the forecast that Brad had mentioned earlier. So that's why you see the air taxi and general aviation instead of specific aircraft types. All in all, the forecast projects total operations at the airport to grow an average of annual rate of 1.9% from just under 40,000 operations 2019 to over 58,000 operations in 2040. So here we look at the base aircraft. So in terms of base aircraft, we developed two forecasts. One is the constrained growth that Brad had mentioned, and the other is unconstrained growth. The constrained growth method is limited by the number of hangar spaces available in the hangars to be constructed that were shown in the 2015 master plan. The unconstrained method shows the number of base aircraft at the airport if additional hangars were built based on market demand. So it assumes that the airport will build enough hangars to meet however much demand exists. So this was calculated based on the wait list, regional demand, the demand driver study, and reason to assume, for example, if 50 additional hangars were built, that there will be 50 additional aircraft based at the airport, either year-round or seasonally. So to contrast the two methods, looking at the airport's inventory of current based aircraft numbers, the constrained forecast projects around 250 based aircraft by 2040, while the unconstrained forecast projects around 352 based aircraft. So this table shows the constrained growth method forecast for based aircraft, and it compares it to the 2019 TAF base aircraft forecast. So this method, like I said, uses the number of, it forecasts the base aircraft based on the number of available hangars and the types of hangars expected to be added in the future. So on the left, you'll note that it says in the TRK inventory. On the right, it says FAA validated. So the FAA validated column is what, like Brad mentioned, requires a forecast that uses the MBAIP, or the National Base Aircraft Inventory Program's validated list. So we made a separate forecast for that, while we compared to the inventory forecast, which uses what the airport provided data to forecast base aircraft. And so the FAA validated forecast is what the FAA will look at when comparing the forecast to the 2019 TAF. And I guess specifically, I'll mention that the constraint forecast assumes that the hangars, that 12 hangars will be built in 2025, and an additional 6 executive hangars will be built in 2030, which is how we calculated these numbers that you see in this table for the inventory forecast. And with that, I'll give it back to Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. And I just want to go back on that based aircraft. That was again, it's just filling the hangars from the master plan. The dates, I know we note this in the report, but we understand that hangars are built at the discretion of the board. So this was strictly a forecast just to assume that those are filled out. And the FAA validated is essentially a proportion. It's hard to predict who's going to actually base their aircraft there officially through the database. So we essentially kept that proportion the same moving ahead. One last slide here, and then I'll hand this back over to Kevin and open it up for discussion. The critical aircraft. This is, for lack of a better term, it's critical. This drives your design at the airport. It drives your setbacks, your safety area requirements, your runway protection zones. And what we had in the previous in the 2015 master plan was that runway 1129 was the Cessna Citation medium-sized jet. And it was actually a smaller aircraft for the crosswind runway, and we were predicting that the crosswind runway would eventually meet the same design code as 1129, which is a B2. What we found far and away, thank you to the technology you have out there, that vector system, what we found far and away is that the Pilatus PC-12 is your critical aircraft, and it is the design driver for both runways. So what that means now is runway 220 is a B2 runway, and that's what we had predicted in the master plan. Doesn't really change anything. I know taxiway golf is slated to potentially be moved and widened, but that would bring, when that happens, that would bring that taxiway to standard. Any other technical stuff with the runways, and I'm happy to answer questions with that. But the key point from this is that your airport reference code did not change. The change to 220 was predicted, and that we also don't anticipate any expected changes to the critical aircraft or your design code over the forecast period. Personal opinion here, but because of your physical limitations, because of, I think, some of the activity that you do as a board, I think that you are relatively settled on your fleet mix that will be coming in and out of there. Technology in these aircraft has increased greatly over the past 10 years to fly at night, to fly in inclement weather, but that really hasn't affected your fleet mix from an overall proportion of what is coming in and out. There's no Boeing business jets. 737s are obviously not coming in. So I think that's good. I do believe that's a goal of the board and was a goal of the master plan. So just a note on that. And with that, I'll hand this back over to Kevin. And like I said, the Meet and Hunt team is here to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, so just to circle back to where we were, again, this is intended to be an introduction to the forecast and to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions or anything that you want to review with our project team. Myself and Hardy and staff, we've been through this at length, and so we're happy to answer questions. Kind of the bottom line for me is we're projecting 2040 to be at about 59,000 operations is kind of the new number that this report shows. And the options you have is to ask questions, ask for more information, continue to another meeting. You can also approve it at this meeting. After the board approves it, then we will submit it to the FAA for their approval. And then the other thing that will be coming at a future meeting is that updated airport layout plan set that primarily has updates of the things that we've already done. It doesn't make any major changes. It just updates the things that were on the master, like the wash rack, for instance. It was on the master plan to be in the location it now is. So now we show that, just things like that. So that's kind of where we're at. So with that, we'll turn it over to the board back to Vice President Diamond.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Brad, for that. Let's just open for questions. Mary, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah. Surprise. One, going back to that chart with all the dots on it, is that trees that are the red, green, yellow? Is that showing trees? Or what is that showing? This is on your presentation.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I didn't want to get into too much. There's a lot of data on here. It is trees, and we've color coded them as red being a penetration and yellow is a near penetration and green is clear by more than 10 feet. We can present that in many different ways. I will say that I've worked with Hardy pretty close, and we've been proactive on either marking and identifying these trees. And I know I don't want to speak for Hardy right now, but there is, some of the critical ones have been mitigated. Some will be. It's coming. Will be, yeah. And it's a heavy lift. I mean, you can see there's a lot out there, and that's again just a benefit of the airport's GIS, and another big component of this layout plan update is when we submit this will be as clean as it can be.
Okay. Then going forward, how we adopt this, and we also have talked about as a board going to putting out 2 RFPs. One is to do everything else besides chapter 2, and one being do the whole thing. What's the status on that? And would this change again, or would this become chapter 2?
Yeah, so we're going to talk more about that as we go through the budget process and kind of some ideas we have from a staff perspective. We want to get this, and what we talked about a few months ago, I had on an agenda that let's get through the forecast and look at this, because there's $100,000 worth of work done on the ALP and the forecast, and I don't think we want to just pay for that again. When I'm impressed with the work they've done. I like from what I've seen, I've read a lot of forecasts. I want us to take a look at the work we've done so far, and then we'll talk about what we want to do with the rest of the master plan, particularly with the facility requirements and development alternatives. I think there's a lot to talk about there.
But this would be like the standing chapter 2 in either way that we went. Because as I recall, I thought Teresa said, let's issue 2 RFPs and see.
Yes. And then sorry.
Yeah, and that's the route I thought we were going, but now I'm hearing that you've pushed that off.
No, I updated the board on that a couple of months ago, that we were going to get this forecast. It was in one of our general managers report. And we talked about the fact that if we sent that out right at that time, it would be extremely confusing to the consulting community as to what we're doing and why we would RFP a master plan when you're getting ready to present a new forecast. I mean, it just was very confusing. Okay. So the other thing is, if we're going to do a full-blown master plan, I got to clear some stuff off our staff agenda, because that's all we're going to do for a year if we're going to redo all that. And that's more of a,
this could get sucked into whatever consultant.
It could, yeah. This is our data, we own it. And so, it may mean that if we go out and do a full new master plan, which we're going to make a decision on that fairly quickly. I'm not pushing it out that far. We would hand whatever consultant, this report and say, this is done. Okay. And so that we just don't want to waste the money.
Okay. The critical aircraft, I remember that whole discussion before, Brad, and the B2 is on 1129 because it's a 50-80 airport runway. It's 100-foot wide. But 220 has a different, is it the same B2, or did it seemed like it was an A2 classification before?
It was a B1.
A B1.
And that was the 2014, 2015 designation. However, the forecasts and our analysis showed that it would eventually move into a B2.
That's if we did that work that was talked about, but we're not doing that work that was talked about. So since it is limited to, what is that, 3550? I think is its single wheel, dual wheel capacity, and the length of it and the width of it, doesn't it have a different designation?
I'm looking at the designation purely from the FAA standpoint, that there were at least 500 operations on that runway by B2 classified aircraft in 2019.
So the Pilatus did use the 220.
And other B2 aircraft as well.
Okay, so they're capable on to do B2.
To be honest, Mary, sorry to interrupt. To be honest, there are C aircraft that operate on that occasionally as well. They just don't cross that threshold.
Brad, just for the information of everyone listening, in 2 sentences, tell us what B2 and what those classifications are. I think a lot of people don't understand what.
Yeah, the letter is based off of the approach speed, the certified approach speed of the aircraft, and the number is based off of the wingspan. And from that, all of your setbacks and safety areas are determined from that code.
Yeah, and A being small and E being ginormous.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah. And so what you're saying, the C aircraft, the the jets coming in at 150 knots can use 220 and do use 220?
That's really up to the operator if they feel that they can operate on that runway.
We do
Yeah.
have those operations.
Data, but looking at the data, it has happened and it can happen.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. I was really shocked to see the touch and go increase from 20% to 35%, especially since some of the neighbors are very much calling a lot about touch and goes. And that goes to my thought then in terms of we're throwing percentages at it. The tower, when it's staffed, is counting it from what I understand now. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah. Well, Hardy, Hardy can answer that better than I can, but yes, we have ways of counting those and then comparing those numbers.
We don't
talk about touching. Yeah.
With touch and goes, we don't count touch and we don't have a current way to count touch and goes. We estimate, we use a multiplier, and that's what Brad, we kind of did some exploratory counting and applied methodology and multiplier to the single engine piston category. And Brad talked about his data shows 20%. We want to change that to 30 to 35%. We feel that the number was artificially low. So that's an estimation. We brought forward proposals, technology proposals to the board in the past to install a camera system that may help us actually physically count the number of touch and goes. There is technology that will allow us to do that. Sorry, I changed my webcam. I wasn't sure where it was. So we can put that technology on the airfield, although it does come at a cost. And that we're happy to bring that proposal back to the board if we think that we want to leverage that type of technology to actually measure touch and go operations.
And in terms of two people sitting up in the tower at the rate of $1,700 a day or $2,132 a day, they tried counting them but could not do that during, from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. when they're there.
They do count, and if you go in the tower, they have it's like a little counting machine that they press buttons on, and so they do count them. The problem is the tower's not open all the time, and also there's this relationship between training flights that go to the training area and come back being counted. So we certainly can get a proxy count from the tower, but it's not going to be 100% accurate.
So I understand nothing's 100% accurate, and, we've been, old data was if we got 90%, we were happy. So what's your feel in terms of, is your feel that there is 35% of the piston is touch and go? In time, when did that increase to that point? Has that become, because we've become such a much bigger training operation under Mountain Lion, that's become what I mean, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
And what tower counting is the tower? When did this tower's been there? This is their 4th year. That's something that I would like us to address at a future meeting, because this 20% versus 35%, and given the impact that has on those surrounding neighbors, is significant. And we need to, that's a big jump.
Yeah, we can come back with, letting you know how the tower counts them, and then maybe bring the technology proposal back just for reference so the board can see that. Some of the board members probably haven't seen that proposal. Yeah. And then hopefully
I can tell you, just even locally, there's just more interest in flight training. And yes, I would argue that with Mountain Lion and Sierra Aero over there with multiple aircraft, that does have people, doing more flight training. We're going to actually do the August ACT meeting is going to be on that very topic, and talking about, these kind of things. The one thing to remember is almost all the people training are locals. They're people that live here. They're the folks that live in our neighborhoods, and it's their family or them that are doing this. We don't have, and I talked to Jessica about this the other day because I was concerned about it. I don't want our aircraft or others to be drawing people in to flight train here. And they said that's not occurring. These are people that live here. These are our locals. Now, we may have some touch and goes coming from other areas, but we've always had those. They're coming from outside the area, but most of the touch and goes that we have, and I sit out my door and I can watch them, they're primarily our local aircraft.
Kevin, can I just pause you for a second? I'm concerned that we're starting to stray off the topic of this report. So I just wanted to see if Mary has anything about the report, anything more about the report.
Well, I mean, to go from 20 to 35% in our projection is a pretty significant jump in terms of touch and go. It is something that we need to be aware of because it affects how we structure the airport. And how big of a training facility do we facilitate? Onward, in terms of in one place it's 110 FAA, and in another place it's 119 for the FAA validated numbers. And that's for now. And I think that's very interesting in our hangar discussions to realize that, there is this demand, and that was a big, very valuable data point set for me when we have this demand, and that means people have more than one hangar in different places, and how do we address demand? The other thing would be the constrained growth is. That was the other question for Ms. Song. In terms of doing the regression analysis, you did that for the what was it? On two of the options, but not on the others. Was it just not appropriate to do it on the others?
Yeah, so for the other methods, I guess they wouldn't apply. So for the FAA terminal area forecast method, it's 0%. You can't correlate something with 0%. And with the turbine regression, it was a little more complicated because of the TFMSC having such incomplete data. I would only be able to, it would be similar to the turbine regression method, but they would have missing operations. So I felt like averaging 6 different airports would better encompass what potential peer airports would probably be like, because some airports were decreasing, some airports had increasing operations. So, and and I figured the turbine regression method covered a regression method for the turbine aircraft. So the peer airport method was an alternative look, and just to see what it would be like in that method.
And peer airport does not lend itself to a regression type analysis. That was just an averaging.
Yes.
And why wouldn't you do a regression on that? Or it's just the type of data is not the same. Because I mean, that's what we are becoming, is an Aspen and a Vail and those kinds of things. So I'm just, I can, it's the classic. I'm, when you look at options in my consulting engineering business, kind of the two extremes don't really fly, so to speak. And then why you choose, the total ops regression versus the peer airport, because what was your reasoning to pick one versus the other?
So for me to pick one versus the other, it was because of such, the airport provided such comprehensive data that we could get a look into, the different sizes of jets, different, the single engine, multi-engine, which is quite rare in my experience. Most airports don't have such detailed data. So for the turbine regression, it's the two regression methods are actually quite detailed, where we actually regressed individual types of aircraft. So like the Jet 4, Jet 5 categories were forecasted individually. So the turbine regression method only applied the regression method to only turbine aircraft, and the single engine piston, multi-engine pistons were forecasted with like a national average growth rate, and then we summed it together to get the total number of aircraft. So I felt the two regression methods were kind of more in detail because it looked at the other aircraft types, whereas the pure airport was just more general, applied turbine, just only applied to the turbine aircraft. Since they were just missing data, and perhaps the peer airport data would work if you were only interested in seeing the jets and turbine operations forecasted, but I think the other two methods took more in, the local situations into account.
Okay. And yeah, otherwise, I read through it, and I'm not a statistician, so all that, so good for you. You understand how to do all those regressions. But it was good. The thing that really jumped out was the touch and goes and the constrained versus unconstrained growth. And if we just grow a lot of hangars, it's kind of like having buoys at Lake Tahoe. It's easy to use and more people are going to use it. That and those two plus the FAA validated data, those were three really highlights that I think we as a board need to be aware of at all times in our decisions. And thank you for this report.
Thank you, Mary. Rick, how about you? Anything?
I don't have any questions. I'm very interested in updating this ALP for a lot of things that have happened. The projection is interesting, but a lot dependent upon things that we would have to vote to do that I don't know whether we're going to vote to do it or not, hangar building, etc. So, I understand the purpose of it because a lot of things have changed in 5 years and we've done stuff, but I'm kind of sitting back and looking at it and deciding, that we probably should update it. I don't know how far.
Okay. All right, Kat?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I have a really hard time wrapping my head around another 20,000 operations on top of what we already have in the next 20 years. And it's just hard to know what that looks like or how that affects this community. So it was interesting data. I'm glad we have this. It's a good piece of information for sure.
Okay, cool. I have a few questions. The first are around the PC-12. The data from 2017 to 2019 actually shows a trend toward a decrease of turboprop operations, which is where the PC-12 would be. That was one question I had about it. The second question I had is, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin Hardy probably know this better. In our reality, I think that the majority of the PC-12 operations we see are repeat operations from the same aircraft that is either whether it's owned by Mountain Lion or it's owned by someone else on the field. So while we're seeing a number of operations from a PC-12, I'm wondering how many actual PC-12s are resulting in that number, which makes me question, is it truly a critical aircraft? I mean, if we were to think of the class of a Cirrus or a 182, I would think is in terms of diversity of actual aircraft using the field, that they would be far more impactful on what we're doing than the PC-12. But so I just wanted to, I don't know whether it would be Brad or Patricia or Mitch who would respond to that, but I'm just curious about that, the designation of that as a critical aircraft.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't want to get too technical or into the weeds on this, but what we did is, again, the airport has such great data. We dumped all that in to a database. Then we know what the classification is, whether it's an A, a B, a C, or a D, or a 1 or 2 or 3, and then just sorted it. And what you come up with is B2, and for the most operations are by B2 aircraft. And out of that B2 pool, the aircraft with the most operations is the PC-12.
Maybe if I can follow up on.
Go on.
I was just going to say real quick, I don't think, for FA forecasting purposes, I don't think they care if it's 10 PC-12s that are generating those or 100. aren't they looking at the operation? At least how they want us to forecast? I guess that would be my question.
Well, the reason I ask about it is if let's take Mountain Lion, for example. They've got PC-12, they've got a Cirrus SR-22. I know they've got more than this. If Mountain Lion left and took their 2 aircraft with them, the lack of the Cirrus wouldn't really affect, because we've got a lot of Cirrus aircraft that fly in and out of the field. But their PC-12 leaving would absolutely affect the number of PC-12s that were operating as operations at the field. That's why I just kind of wondered whether it made sense to think of that as a critical aircraft when we could, for example, 5 more people with PC-12s might move here, and that completely spins that number. But then if a few of them that have PC-12s now left, it would dramatically change that number also. That's why I just I wondered about that. I don't want to get hung up on it. I was just curious as to whether it was the uniqueness of an aircraft was factored into that number, or if that was just operations that could dramatically change if ownership of a PC-12 were to change at our airfield. That was just my question about that. The next question I had, which would,
can I just interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Is the Cirrus SR-22 also a B-2 aircraft? What is it?
Mitch, do you know off the top of your head? It might be an A?
I believe it's an A1.
Yeah.
It's small.
I just want to comment on Director Diamond's last comment, if you don't mind. I'm very, very sure of this, but I'm happy to look at the numbers again. That if you were to take out let's just say all the PC-12s, let's just say tomorrow there are no more PC-12s operating at Truckee, that the airport would still fall into the B2 category based off of all the other aircraft and the fleet mix that's coming in there.
Okay, I'll accept that.
And I'm happy to look at that more close if requested.
No, the next question I had, Director Hetherington hit on this, the FAA validation concept. Can you explain to us, do you trust this as an accurate number? It's clearly very different. It's by some 100 aircraft different than the based aircraft number that we've got here. This is a huge significance in that number. Do you feel like the FAA number is accurate and it does show that there's some 100 aircraft that are here in hangars that are actually based someplace else, or do you feel like their number is not accurate?
Well, I hate to put her on the spot. I don't know if she's on the call, but Jill would be the person that would be able to answer that. I do know that because, and this has been true since the master plan was completed, the FAA has really cracked down on where end numbers are officially based, and because of certain funding levels, and some airports need so many based aircraft to reach a funding level, that airport staffs across the country are working hard to open doors and knock on doors to make sure that to really coerce some people to base at that particular airport. Hardy, I don't know if Jill's on or if you want to say anything on that, but I would say that it is accurate, and I think it's going to become even more accurate. And
okay,
I think at a place like Truckee, a 50% split or whatever it was is probably right.
Yeah, we audit ours every year. Well, excuse me, Director Diamond, we audit our numbers every year, so we have to make an attestation to the FAA certifying our numbers, and that goes back with the aircraft operator and owner and making sure that the tail number, we use our camera data to make sure that's accurate as well. And then when an aircraft leaves here, for example, Sierra Golf aircraft just recently left, as soon as it left and got picked up at another airport, that airport contacted us and wants us to release that tail number so they can count that on their field. So it is fairly accurate in my opinion.
So it still has a hangar, but it's just not based, because we give that 1% deduction on rent if they home base, because then the counties get the property tax. So when that aircraft that you just said, when it left, did they keep their hangar here?
No, they gave their hangar up.
So then we can say out of the 238 hangars we have 110 are based here. And does that correlate with the numbers that are taking 1% off their annual their rent?
Yeah, well, one piece to remember too is that aircraft are transient assets, and some people have tax implications that don't correlate directly to where they live. So, for example, an aircraft could be here all the time, but they actually choose to home base it at a different airport, and vice versa. So we don't get too into the weeds on trying to understand people's tax implications for their choice, but obviously we want the home base here, and we want to understand who's inside the hangar and who's based here primarily with their aircraft. But it is transient, so that is the nature of it. But Jill has on her list as well an understanding of who's actually here based with an aircraft inside the hangar.
Okay, great. Let's wrap this up. Does anybody on the board have anything else to ask about this or to add to this? Okay, any addition from staff? Okay, so are we now, before we go on, actually, do we have any public comment on this?
I have no public comment.
Okay, so Kevin, what are you looking for right now that you are like, one of the options is that we get a motion to approve what we've got?
If you're comfortable with it, from a staff, we are comfortable with from a staff perspective. So if the board's comfortable, yes, a motion would be great.
Right, and keeping in mind that a motion to approve the report doesn't necessarily mean we like the outcome or the prediction. It just means that we like the report was fine. We're okay with the process.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
And it will be submitted to the FAA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have a motion to approve the report as provided or submitted? I'll make that motion that we approve the report as submitted. Could I get a second on that? Kat, were you muted?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, could we get a roll call on that, Kevin?
Yes. All right. Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Now we can get the RFPs out.
Yeah, so the next step is the ALP. You're going to get the ALP plan set. We're going to be looking at that, and then we're going to talk about the master plan here at a future meeting, probably the next meeting.
All right. Thank you, Brad, Patricia, and Mitch. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you to the board and the staff. We appreciate you listening to us and going through this. And hopefully next time we'll see you in person.
Yeah.
I think you will.
All right, so item 7, the general manager's report.
All right, let me get organized here. All right, I'm just going to hit just a couple of items on mine. One is just the ACT update that we had our first meeting, and it was awesome. Rick Stevens was there. Really appreciate everybody that participated. There's a full report in there. There's a recording available, but I just wanted to highlight that we had that. Later in the meeting, when we do the board agendas, we'll talk about the July meeting and who would like to attend that meeting. Any questions on the ACT update?
I would like to say that I listened to the whole thing, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the 9 people were concerned about the overflights and the noise and what are we doing.
Yeah. Particularly the jump plane and the supersonic props. We've got a couple of those this summer that are flying around a lot. So we that came up, and we're figuring that out. We were working on that today, actually, with our skydive operation. Good. We're going to hit ACT a little bit later for the July meeting. The next one was just bike share. I just wanted to ask. There is more momentum now with Placer County to reinstitute bike share with an electric bike option. And so they've involved me, because we were kind of the instigator of the original bike share program. But I just wanted to ask the board if there was interest in us participating. We wouldn't be running it like we were last time, but it may be an opportunity where we would be able to get some electric bikes based here at the airport for folks to come and go from downtown to the airport, and then also some other bike share around the county. And so I just want to let you know that we're talking about that. Just get everyone's feel for bike share again.
We liked it before, and I think I still like it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the electric options that are out there are far. It's just amazing how far that has gone and where that's going to be. And sorry, not to just go back to the last agenda item, but I am going to talk with Mead and Hunt about that 58,000 operations that we have in the forecast. Just with how fast the electric aircraft industry is rolling, I'm curious of how many of those 58,000 aircraft in 20 years they think will be electric, particularly on the smaller side. And maybe even within a year or two, you could have an electric training aircraft here that's flying around. They're already being successfully deployed all over the place. But anyways, that's a whole other thing on the last item. But yeah, so good on bike share. Last one is I just wanted to let you know that I've been invited and have been participating with the town of Truckee, Truckee Fire, North Star, CSD. There's a group of agencies that have been looking at biomass. I know we've talked about this before a little bit here and there. I know Mary's got lots of good information that she's shared with us on biomass. There is some local interest in doing that. We all went and toured a facility up at Quincy at Lassen County, or Plumas County, I believe, with their county administration building that is heated with biomass. And so there's some things going on there. And I just want to make sure you're aware that we're talking about that. The town, the fire district, there's some others that are really interested in this. And so we're participating with them on that. So any thoughts on that, or any words?
I have a comment on the air show.
Okay, yeah.
I would like to see what expected greenhouse gas impact is of the air show. Some of those planes they're bringing in from far, far away, and I just think that's a piece of information that needs to be part of our thought process in the air show, and information for the community during the air show and coming in, bringing all those aircraft in. I would like that. And any other board, I mean, that's my one, but Kevin's not going to do it unless somebody else pipes up and says, yes, that's a good idea.
I think
it's a great idea.
Yeah, I would, for me, based on the fact that we are taking greenhouse gas emissions seriously, not that this would change operations for the air show this year, but at some point in time, we're going to be asked to decide about another air show, and that would be good information to have there, just so that we're not hypocritical about our motives.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Well, you also have to remember that the airport's closed that day. So there's going to be offsets, but you're right. There's aircraft coming in from all over the place.
And the practice flights and all that.
Sure, all that, the whole air show.
It's a calculation.
Yeah. So what I need to do with that is I need to contact Jay Wintergreen at First Environment, and I can get you a cost and bring that to the next meeting. Is that what you'd like? And then they'll, I don't think it'll take too long. It's just but I can get Jay to give us a cost for what that will take, because we don't have anyone on staff that's pretty technical work, but they definitely can do it.
Right.
So I'll bring you a price for that next meeting.
Okay.
And then on the upcoming meetings, our meeting last week that got canceled, is now a time to talk about setting that up, or is that something that comes up later when we're talking about future meetings?
Yeah, so we have a couple options. We can set up another meeting if you would like to sit down and talk through the goals. We could tackle it at the July board meeting. We put it on there. That there's already a pretty full agenda for that one. It's maybe not quite as full as this agenda. We can also introduce that topic and talk about it at the budget workshop in August. So it's up to you if you want to hold us. I've tried to talk to Teresa. We tried to get some of the agenda items from that meeting on this agenda. But if you'd like to have another meeting, I can see if I get some scheduling on something like that, or I could try and incorporate it into the meetings we've already discussed.
I'd like to see a doodle, because the idea behind goals is that we're setting up the goals before we get to the budget meeting. And one of the other issues was the mission statement. And there was just a lot of interesting stuff on there. And I would like a doodle out somewhere here in early July, because everything else falls from it.
Yeah.
And still zooming, I think it would be something that would be useful.
Yeah, our original, or at least my staff's original goal, was to be able to adopt those airport goals in December with the budget. But having that discussion, the whole intent of that and why we originally pushed that is have that discussion as we're starting the early design phase of the budget was the intent. But we could definitely do that if that's the will of the group. All right, so I know Barry wants to do it. Is that a yes from everyone else?
I think we ought to have the discussion. The question is when. We had a hard time getting that date that had to be canceled due to the airplane crash. So if you can't get it done, we ought to do it at the one of the next two meetings, June or July or August.
Let me ask. Well, okay. The other option is if we want to tackle it a couple hours before the July board meeting when we know we're all going to be around. That's one option. We could do it even sooner.
I would say that's our fallback position to do it for the July meeting. But if we can get it in, and I'm thinking this is, because we're pulling some of it off today, this could be two and a half hours. Because I think goals, we had talked about this last year, that the goals should set the budget rather than the budget comes out and then we define goals.
Yeah.
Where'd you get 2.5 hours? We were only going to do it for another hour, the one that got canceled.
No, that was set up for 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours. That was
no, it wasn't.
It was 1 to 4.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, you'd have lost me.
I'll get a doodle out. I know what we got. But that's all I had on my report.
Thank you.
Okay, and Rick, do you have any comments on anything Kevin mentioned?
No.
Kat, how about you?
No.
Okay, the only comment I've got is that I really like the connection between the goals and the stuff we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really nice to see that we're not going, because I know it's very, very easy. Sometimes we talk about we'd like to do this or whatever, but to be able to see those things categorized by our goals, I think is a really good exercise. And I would encourage us, when we make the decision to ask staff to do something at that time, if we decide, in fact, that this is supporting one of those goals, I think that's really, really cool. Do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, let's close that. Go to item 8, Operations Maintenance Department Report. Who's taking this?
So Dave Hoffman, is he on? Dave is off this week. He was just going to report on 2 things I can give you a quick update on. I apologize, he's on vacation, but at the next meeting, he'll give you a brief paragraph on water quality testing, because we have our own water system after our main meter out here by Clear Capital, and he did some testing, and the water you're all consuming when you're at the airport is good quality water. So he'll give you a little bit of update on that. I want to let you know that we are doing that testing. The second thing is just the Alpha project. We're moving forward. They're going to start paving some of it a little bit later this week. 39% chance of thunderstorms tomorrow. So I kind of like thunderstorms. They're kind of fun to watch, but I don't want any around here tomorrow because we don't want that to get wet. But we're trying to keep our runway closures off of the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And if we get a thunderstorm in here that makes it wet, it could delay paving a little bit. That project's moving along. There's some soft spots out there that they found that they're repairing. But it's on track, it's on budget. That's the Alpha project, if anybody has any questions on it.
Any questions?
No.
No? Kat, you're okay, good, thanks. Do we have any public comment on that item?
No public comment.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, item 10, item 9, the Finance and Administration Department Report. Kelly.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, my camera keeps going in and out, and I'm not sure if the mic's working or not. Hi, just a quick update on our finances after 5 months of 2021. our overall revenue is up 423,000 to budget. So things are looking great thanks to a 60% increase in jet fuel sales. And at the end of the day, our net income, while it was slightly in the negative, we're still 754,000 ahead of budget. So that's after depreciation and everything. Things are looking really great. The FBO has been picking up lots more fuel sales, even with our new sustainable fuel. That helps with the price and also with the cost of goods. But we're selling a lot of fuel and seeing a lot of people coming through, and things are going well. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope. Good job.
Questions for me, Rick? You're not. Nope. We're good.
Nope.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. Item 10, the Aviation and Community Services Department report. Hardy, is this you?
Yes, this is me. The report's in front of you. There's 13 items on it. David's monthly operations and comments report is in there. Flight procedures update. Talked a little bit about the skydive plane, working with the operator and also with Josh on the supercharger piece. The East Smartest Creek restoration work has been kicked off, and so Truckee River Watershed Council and their contractor are on site. We're looking to do a slight modification to do a little enhancement of a roadway for fire purposes. And then item 13, exciting the Truckee Tower and the FAA route of flight. So Oakland Center is using our ADS-B data to goalpost traffic in off of the Squaw Valley VOR over to Delaney intersection, which is out over the lake. And we're trying to route a new entrance kind of route plan methodology so that aircraft come in over the lake and skip the left downwind for runway 29. So it's not all aircraft, but participating aircraft and aircraft that stick with their IFR flight plan long enough for us to offer VFR handling services and move them into a different area. So this is the outgrowth of the ADS-B surveillance system and also the great work by the tower. So I'm excited, and I'll keep you updated as we see how well that works with the summer traffic period. And that's what I have for you tonight, unless you have any questions on the report specifically.
Rick, any questions from you?
No.
Mary?
Yes.
Go for it.
Dave, for DVQ, questions going through his monthly report. The flight simulator was flown for 15 hours. Just curious, is this offset flight time? Do we ever ask him and say, is this offsetting your flying, or is this just to add hours to your pilot log?
I'd have to check with Mark Kobe. I think he has a better pulse of what's going on with that.
I may be able to help answer that. I actually talked with Chris Barbera about that last week.
Okay.
And that simulator, so it's a little of both of all those things. So the fact that simulates so closely the cockpit of a Cirrus and 01 Golf, that is time they don't fly, because they can sit in there and learn what they call buttonology, how these systems work. The other thing that airplane does is you can log 50 hours towards a commercial. You can also do IPC work and other things that IPC's instrument proficiency checks, things like that, in that aircraft without having to fly it. And so I think there's definitely people using that because of the high usage that would be flying to get some of that work. I can't guarantee all of it, but in talking with Chris, I asked him that same question, and he said that they're trying to max out, particularly the students that are really price conscious, which a lot of them are. They're trying to max out the 10 hours or the 5 hours for private, 40 hours for instrument, 50 hours for commercial that they can do on that simulator.
Okay. I mean, because the whole idea is not flying time, but if it's just to add to your pilot log, it's not really.
No, it counts. It counts.
Okay. Again, this was the 662 touch and goes, and that goes to that 35% point. And I was wondering what happened with that, which aircraft is that? Do we know?
So, looking at the report, you could see in top 5 commercial operators that Sierra Aero was the number 1. this
And
month.
so that's the flight training.
Yeah, see, so the data from the month really shows that flight training was very popular. And
So
basically, the diesel engine Cessna that the airport owns and the other 172 that Sierra Aero owns were the main.
So I look at that and I go, okay, Sierra Aero is 500 operations, 499, and divide that by the 2,000 total piston, that's 25% of our piston are basically flight training is what I can then make that jump. Is that yeah?
Yeah, that's fair, and that's why we're looking at changing, possibly increasing that number.
There was also a bit of Cirrus training.
And Cirrus, so it's compliant as well with their 356, but some of their operations are charter operations to the Bay Area or Sacramento or wherever, right?
I think a majority are.
The majority are training?
Probably. I think the majority are charter.
Are charter, so okay. Then going to the, the May operations by type, and I mean, this goes to my life as a bond engineer. When I write reports that go to the banks, we do comparisons previous year plus 2 previous years. And since 2020 was an odd year, in terms of percent change, I guess I would like to have the percent change 2021 to 2019. It's another column in there. The numbers get a little smaller, but it's a more realistic bump because some of those numbers are very different when you compare it to 19.
Yeah, in the first bullet point of the report, it does mention the percent change from 2019.
But that's total. And I'm looking at, I want to know.
Yeah, by type. I see.
Yeah.
So, we could add another column.
Yeah, so like piston, when I compare 2021 to 2019, it was 97% increase, not 64%. And turboprop, it was up 119%. Jets were up 69%. So that is I'd like that other column that is defined, it's a 2021 20 and then a 21 19. And that's not uncommon in the banking industry to see two years of comparative.
And I also took a look back at the report from 2019 in May, and that report noted that there was a lot of bad weather that month.
Okay.
I was trying to see if it was strictly COVID-19 that was the reason for the big increase this year compared to last. And it looked like May of 2019 was also just like a really poor month for flying.
And that could be a footnote. I appreciate that information. I'll write that because those were big jumps.
Mm-hmm.
So David, how hard would it be to add that column? Is that something that would be easy to do?
I could add. Happy to add any additional data requests.
Yeah. No, we'll just probably add in that column if.
Yeah. We may have smaller font, but we can put anything we want in there.
Okay. 4 new households calling in, and the other piece was under the military curfew, 11 operations by student pilots doing night training. Was this on our aircraft?
Some of it was, yes.
Some of it was in 01 Golf or possibly 10 Hotel.
And I get that, but I also know that, some people are very concerned about that. In terms of the top 5 commercial operators, NetJets, JetSuite, Redbird, none of them are really a significant charter. Is Mountain Lion, all of these are local, but yet it just seems like we're not getting the NetJets, and it's just a surprise to me that given some of the larger aircraft that are coming in that are probably operated by some of these other charters, they're not even close to these local. Is that true? That's true.
When you have the the local operators that are operating all throughout the day. When you just look at strictly numbers like that, then NetJets and those fractional ownership companies start to drop off the list. Now that we have Skydive, Truckee Tahoe on there, and Soar Truckee.
Okay.
But NetJets is here. If my screensaver wasn't up, you'd see a jet behind me, a Challenger from NetJets. But, they're here daily, but they don't match up when you start adding up the numbers that some of these other operators are doing.
Yeah, they were probably like number 6 on that list.
Okay.
And we also started to see a new operator make that list called Pacific Coast Jet, I want to say. Maybe last month they made the top 5.
And where are they out of, or
Sorry?
where are they basing out of, or, are they everywhere? Like, if you're not flying, you're making money.
Yeah, I think they're just a fractional ownership company. I'm not sure, but
Okay. And then in the top 5 region origins, they're all arrivals. But tying into that is origins those are the people coming here. So does that also correlate with departures? I mean,
for origins, I just filtered operations by arrivals.
So I guess I'm curious about departures as well.
Yeah. Sometimes a NetJet might arrive from the Bay Area and then leave for like Idaho.
Right.
Move their planes all over the place.
If they're not flying, they're not making money.
Right.
That's just like any big piece of equipment. So that's why I was just curious about departures as well, to include something with departures. And I'm really excited about the Delaney. I think that's going to pull a lot of traffic off the downwind approach, and as well as maybe off of 1-1. And so that makes me very happy to see Delaney been approved. The next thing I had a question on was the storing. Well, I guess we're going to get more information next month. But just in terms of start thinking about it, they own a lot of our sky, and that could affect how we are looking to develop some of our charted procedures. And so I just bring that attention to the other board members to be thinking about that as well. The skydive, I know Hardy said he's working with them on terms of getting our money back or having them put that propeller back on, because it is I've experienced it. I don't know if anybody else has, but it's quite special, and it just stays there for a long time. Onto the tower control. I have to say, I'm really excited by the paragraphs that that Larry had put this together for everybody to read when they come on shift. The last sentence, about safety is always our number one priority. And I agree, we want safe pilots and safe action. But this latest accident, it's tragic. And I'm just thinking, I'm so glad that a fire didn't start, because had a fire started, these neighboring communities it would have been not a good thing. And had that aircraft gone off on 2-9, it could have been sitting in any neighborhood. It could have been lots of places, and it could have been a fire. And so safety from the tower, it's the pilot safety, but somehow we as a board have to also think about safety for our surrounding neighbors as well. So this was very, if there'd been a fire with that much wind, I don't want to even think about what could have happened. And that is something we all need to think about. And I did ask Hardy to start thinking, and so I'm asking Kevin, I'm asking DVQ, Covey, staff, and other board members, when we group pistons together, is pistons. And the pistons include the Cirrus, as well as a 172 and a 182. And they're very different operation types. And to think about how we're collecting data and how we outreach to those entities. And because the piston pilot that goes out for a flight for a $50 hamburger, to deliver dogs, to all those different things, is a different animal in our area than the Cirrus. And it has a different mission. And so it's tying into the IFR aspect, the VFR. And it's beyond how I'm thinking about it, but I'm knowing in my heart that there's something we need to do to kind of differentiate those type of pistons. So I'm asking the board and staff to start thinking how we might be collecting that data in terms of outreach. So those were my thoughts on these various things. Thank you.
Okay, great. Rick, do you have anything? I don't know where you went. We'll come back to Rick. Kat, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a question. Given the fact that every municipality made the decision to cancel their fireworks, what was the airport's thinking about having fireworks for sober grad night?
Yeah, that's come up, and thank you for asking the question. We worked directly with Truckee Fire Protection District, and they did a safety risk analysis of the fireworks. Based on the humidity, the wind, the location, and our proximity to a huge area of paved surface, they made the choice that they would make the decision about the fireworks on the day of the event. Potentially, they kind of conditionally approved it, so we went forward with that. And then the weather conditions and everything were conducive to that. They had 6 apparatus here at the airport. And then they had mobile fire crews with water backpacks out. And so based on the fire marshal and Truckee Fire Protection District and the fire chief, they felt that it was entirely safe. And so we did proceed with it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
We thought a lot, sorry, just to follow up on that, we thought a lot about that too. And we do have a unique location here with 4 million square feet of pavement close by. And so with that coupled with, and I was amazed at how many, there were 4 or 5 pieces of equipment there. And then also just, there was a little bit of just our hearts going out to some high school seniors that had a really unique a year and a half and trying to do something special for them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we went.
Okay. Rick, come on back. There you are.
I'm here. My only comment is, Mary, I hear those airplanes a lot. The high whine of, and I don't even think it's just skydiving. I think it's tow planes as well.
Well, that's, the electric plane will address the greenhouse gas, but you still have propellers at fast speed that are going to break the sound. I mean, it's a propeller issue.
Okay.
But,
I'm sorry.
I mean, my impression is that SOAR Truckee is looking at potentially a different plane.
Skydive. Yeah, the skydive. We're working with
what
them.
about SOAR Truckee as well?
Well, SOAR Truckee doesn't have the aircraft that have those supersonic props. The tow planes are the ones that we're really hearing is the skydiving aircraft, and we're hearing a couple of backcountry older 180s that are here every summer, and they're out doing their thing, and they are extremely annoying. And we talked to the pilots about it. We tried some different things, particularly with the skydive operator, and Mike has looked at every option he can find to find a different aircraft that doesn't make that noise.
Okay, I'm guessing, Rick, there's nothing further from you on that. Because you're muted. Are you saying okay?
I said, good guess.
Oh, okay, great. For me, I just had the easy one, the Delaney intersection, as Mary talked about it. This is a super big thing. So thanks to Larry Finney and everybody else who made that happen. I hope the airport. We need to explain to the community what's happening there, because that's it should be worthwhile. Assuming that we get usage out of that. The other thing, I just on item 8, the supercharger, I've got 2 questions about that. How did we find out they were no longer using the aircraft that ACAT had paid to upgrade? And the report says that we're waiting for a response on July 23rd. I'm just curious, what would we consider an acceptable response? What are we looking for from this?
The first question, I was notified by Mike, the operator. That's how I found out about it. And then the second piece, my acceptable response would be they definitively understand what happened to the aircraft, if it was related to the supercharger, and what their plan of attack to either reinstall the supercharger or pay us back for at least the annual contribution of $2,800 that they would owe us, and then give them some period of time to rectify that situation. The aircraft certainly will not be back in service in 60 days. So I do want to manage expectations. The engine will not be put back in service within 60 days. So we're trying to figure out what caused it, what they're going to do to rectify the engine, using the supercharger or not, and then the annual repayment. And then if they want to stick with the aircraft modification agreement that they have with us, they could resume that in 2022 should the aircraft have that piece of equipment back on it.
Okay, where was the aircraft when it failed?
I have heard differing stories. I've heard that it was airborne in flight, and I've also heard that it was during an inspection. So I'm not totally clear on that yet, and we have a call into Mike to try and figure that out.
But do we know when it happened?
I don't know the exact date. No.
Okay, because I'm just curious, because they would have been shut down for all those winter operations. For all the winter time that they weren't doing this. So I was curious.
Oh, the plane was parked all winter in the hangar. It did not fly this winter.
Okay, so when they brought it out of the hangar, this happened.
Yeah, so I can clarify that. They showed up about 3 weeks before the opening weekend, and the aircraft operated for about 2 weeks before that. 2 weeks during the operating period, and then right then that's when the failure occurred. So the aircraft, and Mary asked a question about 15 or 20 days ago. So we checked with the operator. Indeed, the aircraft was parked the entire winter in the hangar.
Okay. All right. Do we have any public comment on the AVCOM report?
I have no public comment.
Okay, let's get to the action items. Tab 13, classification and compensation studies. Who wants to take that for us?
That'll be Lauren Tapia.
Go, Lauren.
Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
So per board discussion earlier in the spring, we advertised 2 RFPs, one for a classification study and one for a compensation study. And we had a handful of contractors that responded, which I was super happy about. We had 4. Bryce Consulting, Coffin Associates, CPSHR Consulting, and Logic Compensation Group. They all responded saying that they would be able to, complete the studies within our timeline, which I was happy about because it was a little truncated. Normally it's, a month longer than what we proposed. So that was awesome. We reviewed each response and with Kevin and I, and we are we're bringing forth that we would like to have Bryce Consulting do both studies for us if it's the will of the board to have 2 studies be conducted. That is the winner in our books. And it's based off of they've worked with us previously at the last study, which I attached the 2016 class and comp study for you guys to review, just so you could have an understanding of what that report is and what is in it if you decide to do 2. There was some confusion as far as why we separated them. So there was back and forth conversation between the respondents of the thought process of having them be separated. And then I did a request, well, what if you guys were to be picked to do 2, both at the same time? And there was a little bit of a cost reduction by each respondent if they were to be picked to do 2. So Bryce is the lowest. I think probably they didn't give a reason why, but I'm assuming they have, past reports from working with us. Yeah, I mean, we can answer any questions that you have regarding what was submitted to you regarding the classification or the compensation, and our opinions of the person the company we're proposing, and our thoughts on doing one or the other or doing both.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Rick, what have you got for Lauren?
I don't have any questions of Lauren.
Okay, Mary?
Although I'm excited she's in her office.
Thanks.
The shiny new office. All right, Mary, anything from you?
No questions.
How about you, Kat?
No questions.
Okay, I have no questions on this either. Do we have a motion?
Rick, did you have another question that wasn't related to Lauren, but on a broader scale?
Are you reading my mind, or what? Why do you ask that question?
Because
you said I have no questions of Lauren.
Right.
Well, I answered the question that Vice President Diamond asked me.
Okay. Do you have any questions for anybody else, Rick?
I'm going on mute.
My comment is, I'll make the motion, but I am disheartened that we as a district could not get other districts to work together on something like this, because I believe in the prairie dog aspect that happens. And I think once and for all, we should address this kind of more globally again, instead of all the silos, but regionally to be looking at this.
Yeah, I think if we were to let people know with a little bit more notice, we could probably, the idea of us all going together, the thought of it can be, approached. They all, all the districts, I would say, have recently conducted a study in the last year or two, and it's usually combined with when they're negotiating with their employee groups. So I'm sure Kevin can probably bring up the thought at his, general manager area meeting of hey, let's think about doing this and see if they hop on board.
Yes, and I have brought it up.
Yeah.
And the only other one that's doing it right now at the Truckee Donner PUD, we talked about it twice and looked for ways we could consolidate, but the type of study they're doing and their timeline, it didn't fit.
Right.
I agree with what Mary's saying, and I think we can, and I'll talk about it more, that when these things come up, do we want to get on a cycle where we can do them together? But I can also tell you that some of these agencies don't want to partner on these kind of studies, and they're pretty unique to what they do. And, sewage treatment plants want to compare themselves with other sewage treatment plants. Even though I agree with what Mary's saying, is there probably are a lot of ways that you can consolidate and save money. But I don't think it's a hot topic of interest among the others. But I'll bring it up. I'll keep bringing it up with these other agencies that, when we do these, maybe we could partner together, to try and do some of it.
Yeah, they tend to negotiate, like their timelines are almost twice as long as what we're doing, just because of the negotiation process and the interviews. They have a much more longer series of interviews, and employees have the right to like appeal a lot of what is proposed. So
I understand.
That could also be a barrier too.
I'm wearing my fiduciary hat.
Yeah.
Broader region in terms of.
I don't disagree.
Our staff are correlated with heavy equipment operators or with sewage treatment operators. There are correlations that are made because I've looked in past versions of these story reports. And if we're going to make those comparisons, then 2 years later, they're going to come back and look at the comparisons of ours. And then 2 years later, somebody else. And this is a region-wide fiduciary responsibility of every board. And, this could be a 5-year goal kind of thing for Kevin, because this is a 5-year thing to do.
No, there's totally synergy, like in comparing the positions. And yeah, we use that in the compensation, the market survey. Yeah, we just probably have to warm other agencies up to the idea, the thought of it.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying, Mary. I'm not disagreeing. And we will compare ourselves to some of these other agencies that I'm talking about. It's not a common practice, and it should be. I agree, it should be, but it's just not. It's just not something that is often done with these kind of studies, but it should be.
But look at how the airport has come forward on so many things that have been positive for this community, that it should be. And we have become, like Lynn Larson said, we can challenge these other districts to step up. And I think that is a big thing we need to be doing.
So I think with the combined effort of Kevin with his area managers meeting, and I have my HR circle up here, that we all work collaboratively, on a bunch of topics, I could definitely bring that up as well and just see if I could spark some ideas.
And it wouldn't be every district, because I can see pulled out, and that would be fine. But if we could get 5 involved, that would be that again, it goes to this region instead of I'm in here and you're in here and you're in here, right?
Yeah.
But I move. Do I make the motion or public comment first? What do you want?
I don't have any public comment.
Okay.
Go, Mary. Make that motion.
I move to select Rice Consulting to conduct classification and compensation study for the Truckee Tahoe Airport District. I move to authorize the general manager and human resources manager to finalize the scope of work and contract with Rice Consulting, and authorize the board president to sign final contracts.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Hey, Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Sorry, Director Rolfe.
Yes.
And Director Stevens.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Let's go on to item 12, the designation of unrestricted net assets. Who is taking this, Kevin?
Can we do a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
5 minutes. We'll be back at, yeah. Okay, now let's go on to item 12, the designation of unrestricted net assets. And I'm guessing that's Kelly?
That is Kelly.
Go for it, Kelly.
So we went over this briefly in the audit. So at the end of 2020, we are looking at 6.5 million in unrestricted net assets. And so we do this exercise every year to go through and kind of allocate an earmark where we'd like to put these funds. And then we roll that forward to the next year. So this staff report shows where Kevin and I have gone through and allocated everything. And we now require a motion to approve it. And any discussion, questions, please feel free.
And maybe if I could just add real quick to that, this is your balance at the end of fiscal year 2020. So we probably have more cash than, or more money than this. We've had a good year so far. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the process is to designate those audited numbers. You can change this anytime. You don't lock in anything. This is a tool to communicate to the public on why you have $6.5 million in the bank, and if you have that much money, why do you need more money? It just communicates how we allocate these things and why we hold these funds.
Okay. I don't see Rick there, so we'll start. Rick, are you there? You have any comments or questions, Rick?
No, I don't. And we go through this process, and this is allocating where we might spend them, but we're not committed to them. So I'm in favor of this.
Okay. Mary, how about you?
In terms of debt retirement, we have, CalPERS, which we're going to have a discussion about later. It's kind of like possibles, and like you say, we can change it at any time. I don't know that I feel good about debt retirement for the hangars. So I'd like that removed. And in terms of large capital projects, I'd like to see comma or others if we're going to, because I can think of other things potentially. And I understand that it is all changeable, but those are the two things I would have enough heartburn with that I would not vote for this.
That's our loan payment?
Yeah, I have a problem paying off the hangars with property tax money. So that I would not, and CalPERS is something we're still going to discuss, but I would not want to see hangars in there. And it's designated for large capital projects. There could be other things in there that I would like to see, just other.
So are you saying you'd like, because this isn't saying we're making extra loan payments. It's just saying that if we set aside funding in case we can't make a loan payment, and you're saying you'd like that language taken out?
I would like the hangars language taken out. And I would like in the past, I've never seen things in parentheses. And so maybe removing all of the parentheses work. I have the message it's sending to the public is not a message I want to be part of.
Where are the parentheses?
Proposed modifications to unrestricted net assets, page 2 of 3, the top of 3 of 3. Designated for debt retirement, parentheses, CalPERS, unfunded liabilities, and or hangars.
In the staff report?
Yeah.
Because that's just the staff report. Are you saying in the policy instruction, is there something you want? Because what you're approving is the policy instruction. Are there things in that? Because we don't strike things from staff reports, but we could, if there's something from the policy instruction, we could do that.
Okay, I guess I just looked at the staff report and just saw it there. So
if you look on page 2 of the policy instruction, Mary, it talks through the different categories.
And it does reference hangars and unfunded net pension liability and some of just debts that the district has is what. In the staff report, we were just pointing out that that's the only debt the airport has right now is hangars and unfunded pension liability. We don't have any other debt.
Yeah. capital projects for future capital projects, traffic, the control tower projects, setting aside for future capital projects, period. I would like it more open-ended. And in terms of the unfunded liabilities, the debt service, do the debt district, I guess, yeah. Okay, that's the only thing I would change in this. I mean, and I'd like to see more in annoyance, but we always seem to have a hard time figuring out what to do. So,
then, Mary, are you thinking on the capital projects one, just strike the tower?
Yeah, strike that.
I don't have a problem with that. But
capital projects, period.
That would be something the board, if the rest of you want to do that, we can do that. I mean, just so you're aware, I'm going to bring up tower stuff during the budget process, but if you don't want it in the unfunded liability policy, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it needs to be a board decision. Obviously, Mary, I think, is making a recommendation or maybe a motion. I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Going back to you've helped us by writing a motion.
Well, wait, we haven't heard from Kat.
Right.
Yeah. So, Kat, what are you thinking?
Well, I don't have any particular issues, but I also don't mind that Mary does. And if she wants to strike that, that's fine with me.
Okay, I agree with that. So, Mary, do we have any public comment before we go to a motion?
No public comment.
All right, Mary, do you want to make a motion with your amendment?
I move to approve the proposed allocations and designations of the district's unrestricted net assets for calendar year 2020, 2022, isn't it?
It'd be 2021. It's the assets at the end of calendar year 2020 is what it's saying.
So it should be at the end of calendar 2021?
No, it's 2020. It's what we ended 2020 with.
Because it's taking those unrestricted net assets that we had at left over from 2020.
Okay. And move to approve the revised PI 309 as attached with the amendment that reference to the control tower is deleted.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
All right. Director Diamond, or Vice President Diamond, sorry.
Yes. It's...
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Director Ralph.
Yes.
And Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Now let's move on to item 13, the new pilot group proposal. Kevin, do you need to summarize this? Or
we put this on. This is something that I think David Diamond and Kat have worked up. I didn't really get a staff report in there just because I wanted to give David and Kat an opportunity to talk about it. I originally had it on as a discussion item, but I thought I'll just put it on as action in case the board wants to take action on any of it. It's in that same category. But I think it's just a first introduction to this that I think David's going to talk a little bit about. Is that accurate?
Okay. Yeah. So Kat and this is something that Kat and I worked up together. The basic concept being that we have a hangar incentive as to when we're asking aircraft to not fly, the curfew, the voluntary curfew. There's two issues with this. The first issue is that it only applies to hangar tenants, which, as we can see from our operations report, when we see people who are renting aircraft and such, they're not necessarily hangar tenants. So there's a lot of pilots in our area that don't have hangars. The second issue is that the hangar is the curfew sort of addresses the when with regard to noise abatement, but it doesn't address the where. We do have noise abatement policies. We want pilots to adhere to these when it is safe to do so. One step of that is the education of the policy to fully understand that policy. The other aspect of it is just gaining compliance with that policy. So the concept of the group was that we would we would form this kind of a connection with these pilots who are on the airfield. We estimate approximately 200 that would qualify for this. That we would have them in this group. We would have them for training for whether it be safety or the noise thing, all of that, like making sure that they understand this stuff. When we've got discussions for aviators, such as the procedures thing, we've got a captive audience that we can actually discuss these things with. And in return for all of this, there is a training credit given to each of the members. And the training credit could be used for any aviation training, whether it's instrument flight, multi-engine, whether it's glider training. This of course could all be determined, but basically any kind of, training like that. The idea being that this is an incentive for pilots to want to adhere to the rules of this noise abatement, thereby increasing our compliance with noise abatement. And at the same time, we're making sure that there is at least some annual recurrency training with pilots who are flying around the airfield, which is a safety benefit. I won't go into too much of the detail because it was all in that report. The one thing that's not in the report that I just wanted to state for the record, that the approximate cost of this annually is $50,000. This coincidentally is the amount of money that we are saving annually having sunset ACAT. ACAT's budget was $50,000 a year, so that it's not a new net outlay of cash for the airport. It's basically repurposing ACAT. ACAT's main function was this, community noise and annoyance, reducing this, and Kat and I believe that the pilots group will do that, and perhaps do it in a more specific and measurable way than we've had in the past. Kat, did you want to add anything to this?
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay. Okay. So we're here to answer questions about it. If you've read the proposal, if you've got questions about that, and then be able to give some direction to staff as to whether we would like them to move on with trying to put something like this together. So open the questions up we'll start with Rick.
Yeah, I read it, and I support a pilots association. I was kind of hoping it be more pilot oriented, pilot run, where the pilots get the norm and the pilots try and get the other pilots to not obey, but fly correctly, as opposed to the penalty and the staff running it and stuff like that. That's what I was kind of hoping for, and I don't see that in this.
Mm-hmm. I think we've kind of got that now. We have the Truckee Pilots Group. We have EAA on the field. Pilots of course, have always been had the option to form groups together. It's just not happened. And the question I would have about it would be whether if we were to leave it up to something like that, if we would not see any further action on that, or if we did see action, if it would become more of a social group more than it was a specific targeted mission of reducing noise and annoyance for the community.
Well, the other thing about the way this is structured is, it gives an incentive for the flight instructors to really make sure that their students understand what all the noise abatement is, because they both benefit from it. The flight instructors will benefit from the payout, and the students will as well. So it kind of, I don't know, it seems a little like it feeds itself, and it's got the right people benefiting from it monetarily to really push the noise abatement procedures to people who are learning how to fly, or just improving, increasing their training.
This isn't for learning to fly. This is for the hangar tenants. Essentially, this is for based aircraft here.
It is for active pilots in this region.
So how many people do we, 250, you're thinking there's 200 active pilots here. And so 200, and this gives them each 2 hours of flight time. I'm just, running the numbers in terms of how many more training ops, how many more touch and goes, or how many flights are we how many more operations are we gonna see? 200, 400 over a year, which is 1% potential increase.
The amount of time that they would get is going to depend on what they choose to do with it, because some operations are more expensive than others. So it's basically a cash credit toward training. 4 hours in the simulator, approximately 2 hours. But if, as it says in the statement, if they choose an option that exceeds the $250, it's entirely up to them to pay that balance.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I like the idea of, we have no sticks, so these are carrots to say, please be good neighbors. And I had this conversation with Artie the other day, because I've been involved long enough that when the NAP, the noise abatement procedures, were developed, they were geared, most aircraft still went off 2.9, or it was 2.8 at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the NAP maps with them going off of 1.1 or off 2.9, and we've done a pretty significant job getting a lot of locals to go off 2. And then they're going to be practicing, if they're going to, which is a good habit to get into when conditions allow. It's always understand when conditions allow. But this NAP is somewhat outdated given how the fleet mix has changed. And so he and I talked about, do we need to look at the whole NAP process? And he, his point being, let's wait till we get the charted procedures. It could be too confusing, too many changes too quick. The Delaney is a valuable piece that's not really addressed, and it could be something that many pilots could do. So the specifics of addressing Delaney should be spelled out as a positive, as one of the desirable approaches. And so when we about the NAP, I have issues with the NAP. I'm not always sure that the NAP is the best. So you get, I guess it brings it to them, and there's so many more things that they can be part of the education from the flight instructors, like the emergency landing areas and, what's being given in terms of the hangar, all those other little pieces, and the greenhouse gas impact of their aircraft, and the noise signature of their aircraft. I think this could be a much bigger part of the education. But I like the idea. I like where you're going. But just to give them $250 without really fleshing out the education, I guess I'd like to see more components in it. Then
it does. Keep in mind that the proposal does say that it is, the agreement is to adhere to the noise abatement procedures that are set forth by the airport, and if those change, that they agree to additional training to understand how that changes, so that if the noise abatement procedures are amended to say, for example, specifically in calm wind conditions, you depart on one of the runways that's not 2.9, that would be one of the factors in here.
But But right now, all we have is the big map of the NAP and the little map that go to them. So that's what we're talking in terms of the specifics of where we are now versus where we were then, because we don't want to train them into this NAP and then in a couple of years we're going to try and change it again. I'd like us to potentially have it. I like the idea, and I'm willing to give $250 towards this training. I just think maybe we direct staff to develop what we want in that education component, beyond just here's hours in a simulator, here's hours to go in a balloon or hours to go skydive. You know, I'd like to see, like you said, in calm wind, you could go off too with your type of aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And I also agree with Rick in terms of the pilots, talking to the pilots for those specific pilots that we're all aware of who have a different attitude than the majority of the pilots who are trying to be good neighbors, and how that peer pressure can be applied.
Peer encouragement.
Yes, there you go. So I think it's
positive.
I'm wanting it, but I'm wanting more education than just follow the NAP, because the NAP has evolved to we've evolved way beyond the NAP. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this could the group. I think it outlines this specifically in the proposal that it can be used for educational, informational, pulling in, like I mentioned, the noise abatement procedures. You know, it's like having a group of pilots that are accessible to us, that we can ask a question of, that we can get a poll about a particular procedure. We have a proposal for noise abatement change, and we've got a group to bounce it off of, to get ideas, to get thoughts back on, do they have a safety concern? Is there or, you know, just to basically pull the pilot community into that aspect of airport operations in an organized way. You know, right now we don't have that. My feeling about the pilots creating their own group is I think it would turn more into a group about FAA wing seminars and barbecues. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that they would have the interest, especially if they were to ask the district for money to make this happen. There would have to be some accountability to the taxpayers who are paying that money, and that's why I felt like I think the management overhead of this. I did talk to Hardy and Kevin about this. I don't think it's going to be that excessive. It's the disciplinary action or aspect of this is virtually no different than the steps that David Vanderquist has taken now. If we get a comment about an aircraft, it's just that additional step of like, well, was that pilot compensated for training this year and or not? Similar to the kind of level of process we have for the noise abatement for the curfew in the Fly Quiet program. You know, it's like if somebody has violated that, what we do about that. So again, I mean, going back to the thing, the hangar, the Fly Quiet is about when, and it only applies to people who have hangars. This is about when and where, and it applies to all active pilots in the region who are willing to participate in it.
And aren't they getting this information from their CFIs anyway?
I'm sure they're getting this information from their CFIs. The question is, why are we getting violations? In some cases, we have pilots who say, I'm going to fly anywhere the FAA tells me I can fly, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's absolutely the truth. We can't do anything about it. And then we've got some pilots that are saying, I'm flying the noise abatement. Look, I can see the bridge. But if you're flying and you can see the bridge, you're not flying the noise abatement. But they don't know because they haven't had that detailed education. I think that when somebody sits with one of our CFIs, they do get that specific information. But the majority of the pilots that are coming here, myself included, I didn't do my primary training here. So I came and I looked at the noise abatement map and I see the areas, and I, over time, figure I'm doing it right, but I might not be doing it right. So we've got that option here. And then if we do decide that we want to change something, or we want to nuance our noise abatement procedures, for example, like defining a calm wind runway, we've got that opportunity, which we don't have right now.
So let me just,
yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, I was going to ask staff, what do you think? I mean, what are you expecting out of
Yeah,
this?
I mean, Mark Kovic could give a few comments if he wants. He'd be the one that would be implementing this. It's kind of up his alley. That's part of the pilot outreach coordinator function that, we could set something like this up. I see this as a much more enhanced version of the pilot familiarization program that we already have been running, where we do allow and pay for a little bit of flight instruction for one of the instructors that's trained by us to teach noise abatement. It is true that it's tied to hangars. Now, even the rental aircraft, they still have to meet the noise abatement procedures, even if there's 20 or 30 different people that fly that airplane. But this does take it a step further in a lot of kind of cool ways. And so, we're very supportive and feel like we can, the next step with this would be to put it into a policy instruction and bring it back to the board for a formal approval. And then that's with that policy instruction, and then we could go implement it. And so that's kind of, where we would take it next. It sounds like maybe you want to see the 60-minute training program. Yeah. What that looks like. And then to David's point, as it morphs and changes, they're obligated to follow that, and we can, hold a meeting and have people attend and explain, new things that we're doing, and that would all be part of it.
Yeah. I'm willing to consider it. I mean, your statement that, anybody who flies our plane has to follow noise abatement. Mostly, I mean, if they're doing night training, that's not following our noise abatement.
It actually is, though. It's following the policy, which allows flight training. If you're working on a private or instrument or commercial, there are night training requirements that our noise abatement procedure permits.
And if you're doing touch and goes, is that, you have to.
If it's doing the night currency, then yes, that is compliant with our policy.
Well,
I don't allow people to take our airplane around and fly at night, or we've got a couple of flight quiet incentives that are going to get pulled here in the next probably 30 to 60 days. Well, 30 days. We've got a couple of them out there because I don't have a reason to not pull it. We do pay attention to those, and we do pull those incentives if people don't want to follow those requirements. And so we make sure that everybody that has an aircraft, including our own, meets those requirements. And ask Cardi, every time I get my report every morning of every aircraft that flew in the before 6 a.m. or after 10 p.m., I want to know who they were. And on every occasion, our staff are on top of it and finding out why and where they went and what they were doing. It's pretty rare, though, that we have those. It's mostly care flight and recently these training flights, because it doesn't get dark till 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Why can't we insist on, at least in our plane, that they do night training instead?
Well, they do. For instance, we had an operation last night, but they have to do a night cross country for commercial. So they fly away and then they come back, an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and they have to do it in darkness. And so these folks do leave. We don't have a lot of what they call stop and goes for night training. We don't get a lot of those. And Hardy and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong if you've got other information, but the night ops aren't usually a problem because at most of the year they're doing them at 6 or 7 in the evening. This time of year, we just get these later in the evening when they're doing that kind of training, but it's all related to their training requirements.
I will mention one thing just from the whole industry that is related to noise and annoyance for airports and aircraft. And I know this is going to resonate with Mary because she's heard this for years. It's many incremental steps moving in the right direction that moves the needle. And so Truckee Tahoe Airport, and I know Kat has been to a lot of these conferences and David's been to a few too. You just slowly edge the needle along. And I think this is another arrow in our quiver to just incrementally keep trying to push the needle in the right direction. And so it's not a panacea. So, for example, we have a lot of aircraft that create annoyance who are flying the exact route that we've asked them to fly. And in my opinion, it is only my opinion, I think most aviators local itinerant based here, training here, work really hard to follow the NAPs and do everything we ask of them. So that's, I think most people fall in that category, but this is just one more way that we can keep moving, keep pushing that dial of compliance and a reduction of noise and annoyance. But it's not going to fix everything, but I think it's another solution.
Kobe, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly with what Hardy said and support the endeavors of the board. Thanks.
Okay.
Chicken. No, it's an interesting thing because I'm hearing from Artie that, and I've heard it for years, 90% of our pilots or 95% of our pilots are doing what we ask them to do. And then if I say, well, wait a minute, why am I giving them $250 if they're doing what they're supposed to do? But again, as Hardy says, it's one more carrot, one more incentive to say, hey, the community cares about what you're doing. But that's where I think the education aspect of it could be much, much bigger than just fly the NAP, because the NAP, I think, is outdated in many ways. And I think we're not addressing Delaney. Some aircraft can do it, some can't because it's too steep a descent. I understand that. But, it's so many of the pistons, and I think it was in the Vector report, are still going off on 2.9 in calm wind. And why?
A lot less of that. I mean, we've had a tremendous increase in runway 2 departures.
Yeah.
Some request it, you're right. But it's not because we haven't asked them not to.
Right.
Yeah, I think that to Mary, to address that, why do they do it? Because it's their prerogative to do it. They can do it. We can't stop them from doing it. So is there anything possibly we could do to prevent it? We could figure out a way to incentivize them to not do it. And that's where this comes in. This is that kind of like, it's not like, as I say, when we turned ACAT into ACT, which I think is going to be a big improvement on that level, on having conversations and having that connection, that tie-in with our community outside the confines of a board meeting. And I kind of feel like the pilots group it's an opportunity for us to do this with the aviators, in to have that same kind of like, let's like formalize our relationship here so that we can have communication back and forth. We can discuss these things, and then possibly come to collaborative solutions that are increasing safety and decreasing noise and annoyance. So for me, it's just like, this is why we're here.
And I'm willing to look at it. I want to see what the education component is, and safety. Again, safety is a big part. It's safety for the pilot. But again, in part of education is also safety for the surrounding neighborhoods. That's a big part.
Exactly.
So show me the education, what it's going to look like, Mark Covey. Work it up. And then it becomes a policy instruction. And so think about all the things we've been doing, invite a pilot to that lady's deck, that called into the ACT meeting. It's like, let the pilots experience how the neighbors are feeling as well, is an education component.
So I'm guessing, Kevin, are we looking for
something? I agree with that, with adding to this, but I also would like to point out too to the board that we have a very robust outreach program where we do spend a lot of time doing a lot of education to folks that are outside of the area that are not hangar tenants.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say honestly, and David Van Quest sees the comments as well, whenever we get feedback from folks, I send it to Hardy and I send it to David. If somebody makes a mistake, they are apologetic and they will correct their actions. Inherently, people want to do the right thing. When we let them know that they violated our noise abatement protocol, there's not a screw you attitude. People want to do the right thing, especially with our corporate operators, especially with local people, especially people that come here a lot. So
There's a few.
I'm not really sure where the idea comes from that we have a whole group of people that are against working with us. I think we have a great solidarity in our pilot community. Let's just keep spreading the word and doing what makes us good neighbors as pilots.
Yeah. So Kevin, then are you looking for consensus from the board to go back and draft a?
Yeah. So I think what I would say next steps are to continue working with Kat and David. I mean, they're kind of the author of this, so it's essentially an ad hoc committee, if that works. But what we could do is put this into and we don't have to do it that way. You could just turn it over to us and we'll bring it back. Put this policy instruction, or put it into a policy instruction for the board to adopt, and then also, Hardy, Mark, and I, and anyone else that we could put together what that training, that 30-minute or the 60-minute training would be. We can put that together and then bring that back.
Okay. So what? How do we get board? Do we just ask for board consensus?
Is there consensus? So there's two questions. I think everyone agrees that, yeah, put it into a policy instruction and show us the 60-minute training thing. What are you going to train on? Seems like everyone agrees on that. The second question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one thing I'm hearing. The second thing is, do you want staff to go do that work, or would Kat and David like to participate in that process?
So what I'd like to do, I feel like we've not heard from Kat and Rick that they would like to go that route. So I'd like to hear from them on that. And then I'd also like to ask Kat if she would like to work on an official ad hoc. I'm happy to do that with you if you want to do that. That part, that's probably the easiest part to answer quickly. If you think about that, Kat, would you like to do that?
Yeah, I would like to work on ad hoc. Sure.
Okay, so then the next question for you, Kat, is: are you okay with that other part, which is where we work with the staff to come up with a policy instruction that we'll then bring back to the board at a later date?
Definitely.
Okay, Rick, how does that sound to you?
Okay.
Okay, and Mary, that's good with you?
The education component is what I want to see.
Okay.
We're forming an ad hoc committee. That sounds good.
Form an ad hoc with Kat and I, and then we will work with you to come up with a policy instruction that will work for the board.
Josh, did we do that right? Are you good?
Good. Yes. Thank you. That was perfect. Yep.
Thanks. All right, cool. Do we have any public comment on that?
No public comment.
Okay, let's go on to item 4. Thank you, everybody, by the way. And thanks, Kat, for working that with me. Item 14, CalPERS pension unfunded liability discussion and possible action. Who's leading this one, Kevin?
That'll be Kelly Wu.
Take it away, Kelly.
Hi, it's me again. I put together a staff report, kind of just going over our pension plan. It's a lot of this is from the audit that comes out every year, just explaining what it is and what we do. So I'm happy to answer any questions on what our retirement plan is. But the goal of this conversation is just to talk about our unfunded liability, which as of 12/31/2020 is at $2.9 million, and talk about how we can start paying it down. So every year we have a mandatory payment through CalPERS that's calculated by them. And we're talking now about paying in addition to that to try to reduce that liability. So there's a few different options. There's many different options actually. And we can have Jeff Chang from BBK chime in and talk about this as well. But in this,
I have some specific questions, Kelly Wu.
Oh, okay. I hope I have specific answers. Otherwise, I'm going to have to.
Well, you've tried to answer me, and I apparently am too stupid to figure it out. What does CalPERS charge us on the unfunded liability? And you sent me this snippet, and are you telling me that they're charging us 7.7% on the unfunded liability?
Yes. Sorry, I'm looking back at what I sent you.
That's how they're making their 7%.
Here's what I have heartburn on.
Oh.
Is if we're paying 7.7% on $3 million and what we've got sitting in the bank earns like 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect there, and we ought to be paying that down as fast as possible. Now, I'm not for paying $3 million to pay it off immediately, but we ought to start whacking down on it.
And that's essentially what I've suggested here in the staff report is we'd like to do that. And then here are some ideas on that we have.
Why do we have to do an actuarial study? It's pretty simple. We got to start paying it down. I will put in the budget recommendation for your consideration. We'll pay off $500,000 a year at an additional $500,000. This is just incredible negative arbitrage.
Well, the suggestion from Jeff was to reach out to Bartel and Associates, which the town of Truckee works with, and a few other agencies around. We've never done an actuarial study before, so I think it could provide some good information and some kind of outside info to us just to see what our other options might be. But I agree. I think that is a really good option, is just to start making an additional payment every year on top of that.
I can't believe it. This came up at the audit where our auditor said we should do it. And I can't believe it's taken me 5 years to figure this out.
Well, CalPERS doesn't make it easy to understand, I'll tell you that. And so we've been learning about it too over the last 6 months and trying to figure out what the best process is to kind of figure this. It does move. And so when we say that, this is what the numbers are right now, 2 years from now, it could be different. We don't have to do the actuarial study. We can just start funding that and putting that in. The actuarial analysis could help us understand where we would be over different scenarios over time. And so, Jeff is on the call, Jeff Chang with BBK. He's really good with this stuff. He can maybe help us understand, what the advantages of one of those are. But yeah, we don't have to do it. We can just start paying it.
Well, I'd like to hear from him about what he thinks and what we should do. Our auditor thought that we should start paying it down. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, Rick. Hi, nice to talk to you all. I think staff, and I've spoken with Kelly and your team, they understand the basics pretty well. And you understand, I think, the basics pretty well, which is you are paying 7% money on your unfunded liability. That's the discount rate that CalPERS uses right now to value your future liabilities. So anything that you prepay, you will be saving 7% on, okay? So there's no question about that. The issue really is whether or not you can afford, how much you can afford to prepay and what it's going to get for you and how it fits into your budget. And my only suggestion was to staff was that you may or may not want to do it by the kind of the seat of your pants, which is kind of like prepaying your monthly auto payment or your mortgage. Both you and I know if you prepay those amounts, you're going to pay it down sooner. The issue is whether or not the district wants to have some strategy and plan for getting it prepaid within a certain amount of time and within a certain budget constraint. That's really my comeback to staff, which was, does the district want a strategy or does it want to just simply do this? Because if you just want to accelerate the process without knowing when it's going to end, then by all means, you can do what you're suggesting. I don't have any disagreement with you at all.
Well, the stock market has done awfully well, and CalPERS should have done really well this year.
Well, all right, so here's the deal. The deal is the stock market has done really well, but because CalPERS has to be invested more conservatively than, say, you or I might invest, they haven't made very much headway on the deficit that they have. They were about 68% funded about 5 years ago before the big bull market. And guess what? They're about 71% funded right now. They haven't made any headway, and that's because they have to invest under their rules in a prudent, much more conservative portfolio. And then, of course, they lost money a little bit last year in the pandemic. So it's a tough situation for them. And I guess what I'll tell you is, do not assume that they're going to earn their way out of this unfunded situation. That's not going to happen. It's going to be made on the backs of the contributing employers like your district.
So can I just, I guess what I'm getting at is if we assume that we'll pay $500,000 so that over 6 years we'll get it paid off, that may not be the case. Is that right? That,
well,
things could change and
yes.
modify and
Let's put it this
that's
way.
where I couldn't confirm. That's what I don't know.
No, your point's well taken. So you can set up a strategy and a plan to go ahead and prepay a certain amount of money. And the idea is that if everything were to stay static and follow according to that plan, you would pay it off over so many years. The problem is that CalPERS is a very complex system, much of which is beyond your control altogether, including how they invest it and how much they earn and what happens to the economy, what happens to the stock market, etc. And whether their board decides to change its policies regarding funding and amortization of various liabilities. And those are things that are beyond your control. So like I said, you can establish your own strategy to deal with things based on the assumptions that we know today. But you're right, Kevin, it may not exactly result in full payment of your liabilities, say 6 years from now, despite your best efforts.
So then maybe to follow up on that, and again, I'm not trying to overly push the board to spend $11,000 on an actuarial study, but how would a study like that help us strategize on what $500,000 or $300,000 or $600,000 a year would do? What kind of information would that tell us?
So as I explained to staff, and again, you don't have to spend the money on an actual study right now if it's not a high priority. But the issue is, if it is a priority to so-called pay off your liabilities, and there are two kinds of liabilities. There's the big long-term liability that we talk to staff about, kind of like your mortgage. And then there's the issue of increasing monthly or annual costs, your required contribution. And those are going to increase in the short term in the next 5 to 10 years dramatically. I don't know if that's a problem. Kelly indicated it probably wasn't as much of a problem as the long-term liability. But the fact of the matter is different agencies are dealing with different kinds of problems. Some agencies can't pay the monthly mortgage payment, and that's what they're worried about, as opposed to the whole mortgage itself. All right. So the point is depending on how sophisticated you want to get, what kind of planning you want to get, what kind of tools you want to utilize. As Kelly indicated, there are all kinds of different tools, maybe 5 or 6 of them, that you can use individually or in conjunction with one another, and you can move from one to another. And so all I was suggesting is that if you really want to get more sophisticated about it, you would want to talk to a consulting actuary to know how to mix these different tools together. If on the other hand, all you want to do is, somehow just intuitively reduce your liability, then by all means, just pay more than you're required to pay, and over time you will pay it off sooner than you would have otherwise.
I don't
you want it to be.
I don't think that this is something, every year if we put it in the budget, a future board could change it.
You're right.
And I'm just saying that I am an advocate of, since we're basically making 1% on our money and they're charging us 7% on our money,
right.
It seems to me we ought to start the problem by taking a bite at the apple. Now, I'm talking I picked that 500,000 out of the air because I think you just ought to start it. I don't know what an actuarial study is going to tell us. And I agree with you that CalPERS is not going to earn its way out, although I thought that for a while there they were making riskier investments with hedge funds and things like that. But I don't trust
and I'm very worried about that, Rick. I'm very worried about that. I think they're taking a lot of risk right now. given the fact that they're basically, kind of gambling, if you will, with everybody's money. And in order to get the 7% in today's capital markets, they're having to go to private equity and hedge funds and things of that sort. And the problem is by there's risk involved with that kind of reward, and it may not play out. You may recall they invested in all kinds of real estate in the Central Valley that turned out to be a big bust about a decade or two ago. Yeah.
Well, I mean, because in an actuarial analysis, they have a crystal ball. How good is their crystal ball for what CalPERS is going to do?
No, there's no way that your actuary is going to be able to guarantee anything. Oh. I think all I was suggesting is that an actuary would help you and your staff understand how complicated the inputs are, and how the fact is that any strategy that you were to adopt, A, is not guaranteed, as we discussed with Kevin. It's not guaranteed the result. And right. B, there are different ways to approach it, and you can mix and match or change methodologies if you want.
Give me one example of a different way to approach it other than paying $500,000 a year.
Or at trust.
Sure. So a lot of agencies, again, I think what they're trying to deal with is they're trying to deal with the trending increase in annual contribution requirements. And so a lot of agencies are setting up what you may have read as, they're called 115 trusts. And what a 115 trust is it's a set aside from the district's budget. And you put money irrevocably into a 115 trust. And if you do that for future CalPERS contributions, if you do that, the district itself can invest much more aggressively than it invests its local agency funds. So
I'm not sure I trust it. I'm not sure I trust the district either.
I agree with you.
I don't trust any of you people.
But that's what cities are doing. They're setting aside these, if you will, separate accounts, and their CFOs are trying to, if you will, arbitrage or do better than CalPERS. And the problem is that in today's environment, that's really risky to do right now. Really risky. So I wouldn't recommend that, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Because I don't want to do that, because I don't want to put the district in a position of making investments.
Okay.
I have a hard no.
But that is what a lot of cities have been doing, is they've been thinking that they can beat CalPERS at the investment game. And so they've been setting aside these trusts, which by the way, there's a cost to setting those things up, legal, accounting, and otherwise. And my feeling about it is that one's already flown away in terms of the efficacy of that whole strategy.
Well, let's go put a couple million with Blackstone. That's crazy. We're not going to do that.
Yes, I don't think you're going to beat CalPERS, and which is why, if you don't think you could beat CalPERS, then why not give the money to them? Pre-fund.
Well, you said that this actuarial analysis, there might be other alternatives. So
that's right. So, for example,
give me another idea.
So, for example, we talked to staff about this. Kelly understands this, but for example, you could plop $500,000 extra, right, every year to pay down your unfunded liability, and you could figure out what that will do. Okay, but that will save you 7% approximately over the long term. You can also accelerate, and I think staff has already been doing this. You can accelerate the rate at which you make contributions, which I think staff has already taken advantage of. Most agents pay monthly. I believe you pay yearly in advance. Is that right, Kelly? That alone saves 3.5%, because again, it's like paying your car payment all up front each year, right? You accelerate it. And so that's already being done by staff. That is a cost savings tool. But there are things that you can do along those lines. You can vary the rate of contribution depending on what your targets are in terms of funding. Again, I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I agree that if you accelerate your payments beyond what they have to be, what's required, you will pay down your obligation more quickly.
And save money.
You will save money. You will save money.
Okay, Mary, do you have anything more?
No, I'm with Rick. I think we should make that $500,000 and get it, start paying it down. And next year it might be $500,000, it might be 600, it might be 400, but it's in our, and I'm glad Kelly's prepaying the whole thing for a year. All those things work, but I didn't like the idea, and I'm not hearing that there's other ideas, and I don't see that nobody knows what CalPERS is going to do. And
Kelly, if this is your company, what would you do?
I'd like to talk to Mary Beth at Bartel and just get her 2 cents, just because we've never done anything with an actuary before. I think it would be valuable. But I think we could essentially kind of combine what we could get from her, because we could do just a very basic analysis. We don't need to go into anything crazy, and then Sean and I can take it on home. But I think we all collectively agree that we need to make additional payments, and they can just help us model out a little bit how we want to budget it down the road, and for future boards too, and kind of figure out how that's all going to work.
And I'm in favor of doing the actuary, even though I don't think we need it, because that might lock in future boards to continue this process. I clearly don't trust anybody.
Rick, along those lines, one thing you could do once staff analyzes this better is you could adopt a policy regarding CalPERS funding. That won't necessarily lock in future boards, but it will establish, if you will, a board level, a district level policy as to how you're going to approach it. And it would make it harder for future boards to ignore, I think.
So just to follow up on that, I think getting something that Kelly and Sean's on this call too. Sean's done a lot of research on this. Sean and Kelly are very talented. But having maybe a little bit of help from the actuary to at least explain the why, why we're doing it. And again, we don't have to do that. Sean and Kelly may be able to help with that. And then I do like, something that is a policy that comes out of this, so that over time people know why we're doing what we're doing. So it's up to the board.
Everybody pause. Kat, do you have anything to say? I've been trying to get you in for the last 10 minutes here.
No, I'm just listening. If I approach it like I approach my personal finances, I'd be paying that thing down as quickly as possible.
Okay. Then I just want to say, just to keep us moving forward on this, it sounds like Kelly, and everybody can tell me if this is right or wrong here, that there's interest, if you want to talk to this agency to get an idea of what they're offering, and then maybe come back to us next month with a more specific recommendation that's got some alternate ideas in it. Teresa will be back then, so she might have something to weigh in. Does anybody else on the board disagree with that as an action for this?
You're talking about not an agency, but the actuary, right?
Yeah.
And are you saying, because I don't think we need to spend $11,000, and are you saying go get a price on that, or do a little bit of analysis with them?
Yeah, that's what it does. It doesn't. I mean, I'm thinking right now, when I think of what we're hearing here, that people are fairly skeptical about paying for yet another report when we feel like we do have a plan of action that's reasonable, that will actually save us a considerable amount of money in the long term. And then Rick asked Kelly what she would do if it were her business, and she said she would want to speak to them to get their input on this. That seems reasonable to me, and I would say that we extend that courtesy to Kelly, and then not make that decision to spend that $11,500 right now.
Mm-hmm. I think we could get some good information at the $2,000 level.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, cost.
About $2,000 is probably what we would do. That gets you prepayment analysis and some modeling.
Go for it.
Do you need a motion and all that from us on that, or you got
yeah, a motion would be good. It's an action item.
I move that the district engage the actuary and get some advice on what we should do about the unfunded pension liability options. And I'd like to have it fairly fast, because I want to put this in the budget discussion this year.
with the not to,
Not to exceed?
or she's going to come back with a proposal different than the proposal we have here.
Yeah,
I'm nervous about giving her a 2,000 budget. What if it's 2,500? You know, I mean, I want her to go get some information and do better than the proposal of $11,000.
Well, yeah. And
okay.
We have budget authorization to spend up to 5, but you know, we won't even come close to that.
Well, then that's my motion to spend up to 5.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Did we get public comment? I'm sorry, David.
Oh, sorry. No, we did
asked.
not. Any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Roll call, please.
All right. Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette is absent. Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Super.
In the same context, do we want to send $500,000 in now?
You mean today?
Tomorrow. I mean, if it's, I hadn't heard the 7% money. When I heard that, my eyeballs got.
Yeah, you've been on this board a long time. How come you didn't catch that?
No.
Took me 5 years.
You know, and it didn't come up till it came up in 10 or so, 10, 11.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah. Anyway,
we just let Kelly go do.
I would make a motion that we send in $500,000 this week.
Is that a motion, Mary?
A motion.
So maybe we should just check with Josh real quick.
Yeah. So the agenda is worded pretty broadly, but if you look at the staff report, I really think the intent of the item was to get a discussion about options and next steps, and not necessarily to authorize actual pre-funded payments.
Dad.
So I apologize, but I do think we could certainly put that on the agenda for July if the board would like.
Please put it on the agenda for July.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 15 in the board ad hoc committee reports and other items, website, social media, and the newsletter discussion. Who's going to?
Yeah,
I'm going to sign off, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
This was originally going to be an item for our workshop, and I was talking to Teresa about trying to add a few of those items. I just put that on because I wanted to give the board an opportunity just to talk about that. I've had a couple of you ask questions about strategy with social media website. Also, I think Mary, you and I talked a little bit about the newsletter, so it's just an opportunity to talk about that. I do want to, as we have that conversation, I do want to compliment and at least acknowledge how hard a lot of our staff work on this stuff. Mark Lamb puts a lot of sweat and effort into the website, does a lot of work there. And this may be a budget item as we look at contracts. We have a lot of contracts that are coming up in the fall. And if there's interest in the board of looking at web services contracts or anything like that, that might be a discussion item. And then also, Mary, maybe you had talked a little bit about the newsletter with me. I don't have anything more than that.
Before we open this up, to me, this is a huge topic.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bed. It's 11 o'clock where I am. Good night.
Okay. Can we still do our special meeting and everything with Rick gone?
As long as no one else wants.
We still have a quorum. Yep.
Okay, good. All right, good. So based on if that is the scope of this, I don't know how Mary and Kat feel about this. I would like to do this topic justice, and I'm not sure that we can do that now.
Okay.
Mary, Kat, what do you think about this?
I agree.
There's another argument for the doodle, because if we tack this the next board meeting, which is already full, or we do it in the morning beforehand, we're fried. And why I think we need a second meeting, a separate meeting. So the one thing, when is the next connected? It's not for another 3 months?
It just went out.
Yeah. Okay, because I have some ideas I want addressed in the next connected, assuming we keep it going, is this whole idea of special district money and using the airport as a challenge grant to the other special districts to say, look at what we're doing with property taxes. Don't you want to join the party?
Yeah.
And I have heartburn about the free advertising that we're using in Connected. Those are my 2 points in there. I do not think we should be advertising for on airport businesses, because there's off airport businesses that do not. But there is a lot of issues here, and that's why we need to jump into that.
All right. Well, I'll put it on for a discussion item for a workshop.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Item 16, board committee assignments, ad hoc committee reports, Mountain Housing Council report.
He went to bed. So
yeah,
he went to bed.
Update us next time. There's a meeting on Friday that I believe Rick is attending, or I might be on there. There's a lot of activity going on with the Mountain Housing Council.
Okay, and then the cost allocation ad hoc. This is Mary and I. We just got the email today. Kevin, do you want to just summarize that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. This typically happens with these studies. At least I wasn't involved in the first two, but in talking with Jeff, and then we've sent them a lot of data. There's still a couple little pieces left, and they're in the process of crunching all that. And then we're going to get together. I talked to Jeff. We'll be getting together early July with the ad hoc committee, and there'll start to be some deliverables coming forward. But things are anywhere from 25 to 75% complete, all the different categories that they're working through, but they're working hard on it.
Okay. Mary, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm assuming you and I will be meeting with them.
Yeah, we'll get a more formal update from Jeff.
Okay, Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Joint Powers Authority update.
Yeah, so you kind of got a full update on that already. I'm not going to say anything more than just one kind of consensus item is we do have an empty office over in our annex, down the street where Kelly and Lauren are, and the Mountain Housing, or the JPA, is looking for an office to lease for Emily. And so we may be able to make a little revenue on that space and do a 12-month lease for the housing JPA and have them rent an office from us. And I thought that sounded like a good idea, but I wanted just to, see if the rest of the board agrees. And it would be rent. We would charge, whatever our going rate is over there. So
I'm sure Rick would have an issue about it, but tough, Rick, if you're watching this recording.
We'll do it for 12 months and then just see where it goes. If they, but she needs a place to work. She's getting quite a lot going on there. So you may see something on that.
Okay.
And then
anything else on that?
That was all. So actually, you won't see anything on that because I can sign leases for less than 12 months or less. So I'm probably going to lease them that office.
You're drunk with power. Go
yes.
for it. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Collective update. So we had a meeting with SBC today. It was the first time that SBC made themselves available to us, which disappointed Anna Klovstad and Christopher and myself, and Kevin was on this meeting as well. We asked about the inaction. They expressed interest. They expressed remorse over the inaction. What we've decided, we're going to get by July 9th, we're going to get a proposal from SBC to manage this. And at the same time, we're assembling a list of alternate options in case SBC does officially drop the ball on this and leave us high and dry. Anna and Krista and myself, we're super eager to get going on this and very, very frustrated now that we've wasted a few months for what appears to be no good reason, at least from our perspective on that. So I apologize that we don't have a better report this month from greenhouse gas thing, especially when I hear things like should we do electric bikes and should we do bio? It's like, to me, this is a home for these discussions that not just about the airport, and we don't have the structure. So that's it for that. And then, so ACT attendance by board of directors.
Yeah, so the next meeting is the 14th of July. We're going to be talking about air traffic control, airspace, and ADSB. And so who'd like to attend that?
I would love to attend that.
Okay.
So David and Kat?
And I'm allowed to listen but not speak, right, Josh?
It's a live stream, right? Not a Zoom.
Yeah, it's not streamed, but it's a live Zoom meeting.
It's a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, it's a Zoom.
So I apologize. If it's a Zoom meeting, then that is technically a meeting, and we couldn't have a quorum at the time. It'd be one thing if it was on cable or a live stream, and it was really a one-way communication.
So therefore, I will watch it afterward.
That please, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Kat and David, have you all done the membership sign up?
Yes.
If you haven't, just go on the website and sign up as a member, and then you're going to get all the emails.
Thank you.
And then, do you want to, Mary? Do you want to? Are you interested in the August 11th? Before somebody else takes it, that was going to be kind of on flight instructions and kind of what happens with flight instruction and how flight instructors teach noise and annoyance, and we're still developing that topic a little bit, but that would be the August one.
Yeah, actually, I can't go to that one.
I'll go.
I'll decide by next.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure. And then the September topic is going to be on hangars, and flight quiet incentives.
And I have to note, I listened to the last one, and as I said, 7 of the 9 people who spoke all had issues with noise and annoyance and want something done. And one person invited any pilot, any board member to come sit on their deck on a Friday afternoon or a Monday or a Saturday, Sunday, because it's and the fact that 7 of the 9 people who were willing to speak up have this issue, and I'm a little disheartened that we're not going to see this till October as a topic.
You're seeing it in July. July 14th is on this topic. That's what we're going to be covering with airspace, ADSB. We're going to go through all these things. That's what it's about.
Well, I guess that part of the topic as we transmit the information out to the public. If I'm a public member and I'm annoyed, and air traffic control, I want one of the components is the somehow noise and annoyance. Please bring your comments of noise.
Yeah, so right on the website, it says how we work to influence aircraft in flight to reduce impact. Tools and abilities available to air traffic control. All those things are on there. That's what we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
And through the summer, I'll typically hit these noise and annoyance topics, but part of the whole ACT program is really try hard to get everybody involved. And so we also want, and we have some pilots, so I want to get the pilots involved too. Even when we start talking about hangars, we're going to be talking about fly quiet and how we try and use some of those incentives to influence behavior of pilots. But we're going to be covering why doesn't the airport build more hangars? Because that's another question that we get, not just from people in the community that don't want us to. There's some people in the community that ask why we don't. And so I'm trying to gather all this information and build these topics around everything that's coming in. But it's not a monoculture of comment. There's lots of stuff, and it's not just what's said in the meetings. It's things that come through the website that people, when they sign up, that they're saying. And so I'm doing the best I can. I really feel like these topics are interesting and we're getting people involved. So
I get that, and I'm just presenting it from a person's viewpoint who is feeling annoyed and sees the argument as, towers, I'm not that interested. And how we, and part of how you're transmitting this information is also, we want to build this synergy between pilots and so that they can hear from the community and the community can hear from the pilots.
So we got to have topics that's interesting to the pilots too. Otherwise they won't attend. Agreed.
I'm a pilot.
Okay.
Good. So I think we're good for the ACT attendance. Anything else on that? I guess there might be some public comment. I was just hearing.
Exactly. Do we have any public comment on board of committee assignments?
I don't have any through email unless we have someone on the Zoom who wants to make a public comment.
Do we have anybody here?
You're doing a good job. Yeah, how's it going, guys? You guys are doing a good job, Kevin.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, I'm a pilot myself. I'm really interested in starting to flight instruct out of Truckee. I just wanted to come in on the call and just see how everything was going. In terms of, making improvements or something, I don't know if there's a certain direction that you live in, Mary, that, maybe we can reduce the amount of times we take a certain departure route, stuff like that. But, where do you live in relation to the airport? Are you west of the airport, east of the airport, north of it? I know you're not south.
How do you know that? But,
because of the lake.
Oh, yeah. I'm north of it, and we get a lot of aircraft noise. And I'm not just speaking for myself. I've lived in this community for over 30 years and know a lot of people. And on every part of town is impacted.
Yeah, is it most annoying when they're flying north, taking off, or land?
Is impacted. We don't need to.
Yeah, I apologize. The public comment is intended to really be a
no worries. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was just trying to find ways. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay. Or David Benquist. Yeah. Or Kevin or Hardy.
Yeah, happy to talk.
Okay, all right. So, and we have any other public comment on the ACT attendance?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's close item 16 and go on to item 17. And just a reminder to Mary and Kat, I know it's getting super late, but we do have to go into a special meeting before we all sign off. So if
it'll be super fast.
If it just as a matter of process right now would let's just keep going. Future agenda priorities and meeting management. Let's just keep going.
If there's any comments, the rolling agenda is out there. You can kind of see what's on there. The one item I didn't have on the rolling agenda that will be on is land leasing discussion as we get proposals on that.
Super. Do we have any board comments on that?
No.
Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, 18, staff and board member conference attendance reports.
None yet. There's some coming in the fall, but none right now.
And nothing on the board? Nope. And do we have any public comment on that item?
No public comment.
That surprised me. Okay, so do we have any board member announcements?
No.
Nope. Yeah, you're good. And then do we have any scheduled upcoming meetings?
Well, we're going to try and get one.
Yeah, we'll work on that here tomorrow and Friday of getting out a doodle for something in July to meet and talk about those budget goals.
Okay, and then do we have any public comment on either of those two things that we just went through?
No public comment.
Okay, at this point in time, we have to go into a special meeting.
Are we adjourning?
Yeah, we adjourn this meeting.
I recommend adjourning this meeting. Yep.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, okay. A roll call? Sorry.
Is it public comment? Do we do public comment?
Yeah, no public comment.
No public comment.
All right, Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
Director Odette is absent. Director Rolfe.
Yes.
And Director Stevens is absent.
Okay, now you got to call a new special meeting.
Now we're going to a new special meeting to discuss an item related to the airport's COVID policy. Kevin?
Do we need to do a call the meeting to order and all that with the roll call?
Okay.
I'd recommend, we can skip that. We do need to do the public comment, the general public comment.
Okay, all right. Do we have any public comment on this topic?
No. No public comment.
I don't have an agenda for this other than just the one item. So Kevin, do you?
Yeah, so we're just asking the board to repeal PI 121, which has been our COVID response policy now that a lot of CDC guidelines have changed. So it's just rescinding that. And then staff has a new internal policy that we're using best practices to manage COVID. So we don't have two conflicting policies. We wanted to get this on because this all changed just this late last week. Did I do that right, Lauren?
Yes.
Stacy, I know Stacy's on here. I want to quickly thank Stacy and Lauren for doing such a great job over the last year and a half managing all this and keeping us up to date. It was I'd put them up against any organization and the efforts that they did, and so thank you both. And I think with this, we're going to turn it back to the board to see if you want to rescind that policy.
Do we rescind it or modify it?
Just rescind. We don't need it anymore.
I'll make a motion to rescind policy instruction 121, coronavirus district response policy.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Okay, do we have public comment on it?
No public comment.
Roll call, please.
All right, Vice President Diamond?
Yes.
Director Hetherington?
Yes.
President Odette? Is absent. Director Rolfe?
Yes.
And Director Stevens is absent.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. I'll second that. Roll call, please, Kevin.
All right, we do roll call, right? On the no, yeah. Vice President Diamond?
Yes.
Director Hetherington?
Yes.
Vice President Odette absent. Director Rolfe?
Yes.
And Director Stevens is absent.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
everybody.
right, thank you all. Great meeting. We've got a lot done.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
All right, we'll see you later.
See ya.